All right, I'll call the October 17th DRB meeting to order. Agenda changes, I know of none. If all the board members can review the minutes of October 3rd.
I had no issues with the minutes. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, up next is Ted and Carol Blumhart, final plat review for proposed two-lot subdivision.
Okay, hi. It's been a while since you saw the sketch plan for this. It's a humbling, well, it's an eye-opening experience to go through the subdivision process if you've never done it. This happened, mostly due to that use it or lose it 10-acre one-time deal that was set up when the rules changed for density and lot size that you needed to do a subdivision in the agricultural district. So that's what this falls under. The 10-acre, get to do it once as long as you do it before next March 31st, I believe. This is a two-lot subdivision on Silver Street, about 1.4 miles out from town. It's a fairly regular sized lot, about 330 feet wide, with a one corner of it out front with a pre-existing lot, which is George Bedard's lot in the along Silver Street there. It's a 4.9 and a 5.2 acre lot. The 4.9 acre lot is the existing house site, and the 5.2 acres on the back is the new lot. You left me with 4 go-dos as on sketch plan. One is to provide a perimeter survey, which has been done, and we verified it's 10.1 acres and that it falls under that, it qualifies for that provision. We've added the building envelope. It's a fairly small building envelope, and I'll, if you want to expand upon that area, right there. Mostly constrained by both side yard setbacks and wetland boundary, and that's really the biggest thing that affected the layout, driveway location, building envelope. Everything about this has a whole lot to do with the wetland delineation, wetland boundary, staying outside of that or getting a state permit to cross it, which is what I had to do. There is a state permit in place to cross the wetland boundary to get the driveway over to that new lot. So this is a pictorial, a colored pictorial of, if you want to zoom in on that, the part that where the pink, yellow more. So we did a wetland. Whoops.
All right.
Yeah, rotate. Okay. Oops. There you go.
Actually, let's just do it this way.
So the green, there you go, that's good. So the green, with the slash lines to the in it is the mapped wetland. Is mapped by a wetland engineer and validated by the state wetlands engineer who came out to look at it. The yellow line is the 50-foot buffer, so it's approximately 50 feet back. To make it a regular shape, it's probably conservative in its 50-foot line, but that it's also surveyed in and it's on the plat. So the requirement by the state is to minimize the impact on wetlands and wetland boundaries. So the original application showed the driveway basically following the south property line, coming around the corner and coming to approximately where that rectangle of the proposed garage is. Basically, it turned out going straight through a, probably 400 feet of wetland and a bunch of wetland buffer. Well, that wasn't minimizing the impact on the wetland. They did, the pink there, the way we oriented it is wetland buffer impact. And if you can just, get around it, you have to get around it. But you notice there's slopes up by the existing house, the wetland, there's septic up by the hillside on the existing house. So the application was made to the State Wetlands Office to make that pink impact in the buffer area. So we're not in the wetlands at all, we're in the buffer area. And we have gotten a state wetlands permit. It's approximately 2,800 square feet that you pay them, I think, 25 cents a square foot. Anyways, you pay by the square foot to impact anything. If you impact wetlands, it's way more than that if you can't minimize. But we have a wetlands permit to cross those boundary, wetlands boundary buffer area in that pink to get across it. So that's the biggest change from sketch plan. Sketch plan had it going right along the south boundary. The bad news is it's more in the front yard of the existing house. The good news is that there's less impervious surface and it's a shorter distance. So there's less driveway to build, basically. A little yin and yang there, but that's the approved crossing.
And Ted, my recollection was one issue, or maybe the major issue, was whether the proposed original driveway configuration was going to potentially increase runoff on the neighboring property to the south.
No, this is exceedingly flat field.
I know it's flat,
Yeah.
but there has to be a culvert somewhere.
So there is one culvert shown. If you, it's
Do you want to show, you want to see it on one
yeah.
I guess I don't want to get too technical about it because it doesn't sound like it's an issue. But it sounds like you've addressed the issue of increased runoff on the property to the south, which I recall was an issue for us, or maybe the only issue for us at the time. You can't nod your head all the time, Ted.
There is no. Let's put it this way: the water does not increase in velocity going across that field.
Okay, and
because
that's
of the driveway.
that's what we have to find.
Right. Yeah, because there's no velocity across that field. It took until August this year for the field for most of the field to dry out. So George's comment of hydric soils was borne out from sketch plan. There's more than hydric soils. There's actually now a officially mapped wetland that follows that red line on the survey and proceeds south, I don't know, all the way, probably all the way across Harris's and beyond, I would guess. So that's the wetland issue. Building envelope issue, and that's what changed the design of the driveway. The lot sizes are the same. The boundary, the lot boundary is almost exactly the same. It moved a little bit to the west. We're sharing the first 290 feet of driveway. And my proposal is to increase the driveway width to 14 feet for that shared portion.
So Ted, I'm interested in your proposed garage site and your proposed house site. To say they're a bit separated would be an understatement, I think, for Hinesburg. Is that going to work? Obviously, it has to work because you're proposing it.
It's about the same separation as my current garage and house, and that seems to work.
How does
pretty
it work
well.
with a 30-foot or 30-inch snowstorm?
Oh, I have a snow blower.
Okay.
Yeah, attached garages are just for wimps really.
That's really good for I have one. And I don't have a snow blower.
Really, I didn't want the driveway to, there's a slope, the property slopes up there.
Yeah, I get that.
And I guess it's personal choice, more than anything, where you want to put your garage.
But that's where you're gonna sell somebody a lot.
Or I'm gonna live there in my retirement, yeah.
What's the, what's the building envelope note to the right? It looks like it's non-contiguous with the other building envelope.
Yeah, so, there's a building envelope basically separated by the, leach field. So, there's a main building envelope where my proposed house site is, and, we added a building envelope, to the east. You know, the question Mitch asked, so where are you gonna put your sugar house? And, I said, well, maybe, you know, 'cause I would basically have to come back to you for a building envelope change if I wanted to put any outbuilding down there. So it includes all buildings, and it is, the reason it's not continuous is because there's a septic leach field where you can't build.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the intention of that other building envelope is for outbuildings?
Right, yep. If any are built, that's where they would go. So most of the lot is not building envelope, and actually is not wetland either, but it's further to the east, and I didn't make any access or have any building envelope for it.
How would you get to that easterly building envelope with a vehicle if you chose to build there? I mean, you can't go through, can you put a driveway through the buffer, the wetland buffer?
Not without a permit.
And
Can
So-
you just state your name?
Terry Harris.
So, I mean, there's, well, let's we'll put up the site plan. I think I've beat this to death, because that's all the things that had to be on a plat are there, and all the things you asked for are there, so. So there is room around the septic system to traverse, either uphill or downhill, without, you know, putting a, my intention is not to put a driveway back there, but there is room to move around that septic system. So here we are on the site plan, if you skip out a little bit, and you stay on the,
Oh, you want to
sorry, yes. If you zoom out, and I'll show you the utility easement. The existing, a little more to the west. The existing house is served by I guess maybe that.
No, actually, I think the utilities.
I guess I have to.
Yeah,
I
you
guess-
want to see
yeah,
it on this.
I guess you have to see it on that one. You can't. Doesn't go far enough. Yeah, zoom in on that corner right there. A little more. Yeah. Okay. So there's an existing pole by the corner right there, and the utility easement comes from that pole over to the 50-foot right-of-way. Then there's a note that says all utilities shall be within the right-of-way. So that's utilities to serve that new lot. And that also shows there's an existing drive that's down to the solar collectors, and the new drive is past that, all the way out to the property line.
So Ted, I guess I have a question about building envelopes. You're proposing two, but I see nothing in the findings of fact, conclusions, or order that restrict you to using only one.
Oh, no, you can, they're made for both. I just said one was I'm showing that's the primary house site, and the other.
Okay, but-
They're both building envelopes. They're,
But we could be approving two structures, in theory, that,
You can only have one primary structure.
well, I know that, but we don't have the authority to regulate agricultural structures, but what if you were going to build a boathouse?
Equipment shed, whatever, yep.
I'm not sure we've talked about that, or did you contemplate these as alternative
No.
building envelopes,
I
or?
actually started as one building envelope that just encompassed the leach field that everyone, and you're not allowed to build on leach fields, right? But I believe Mitch is the one who said, wait, how can we have a building envelope? You can't have a building envelope on top of a leach field. I said, okay, well, we'll separate, we'll take the leach field out, and that's what we did. So it
Okay.
was one building envelope that encompassed, that started, 20 feet from the west property line and proceeded to go all the way to the west. The land that was outside of the wetland buffer, which is that dotted line, away from the 50 feet back from the red wetland line, and went to where the edge is. And Mitch says, well, you can't build on the septic system, so that shouldn't be in the building envelope. I said, okay, we'll take it out. So that's how it ended up.
Well, I don't have any objection to alternative building envelope sites. I just want to approve two building envelopes where there can be building without our further review. And I guess that's my concern.
The further review will be getting zoning from
And you're-
Well,
He's not picking one or the other.
Right. I'm not.
no, I mean, there could be a structure in theory, I think, that could be built without,
Accessory only, you're only allowed to have one primary house. Once you apply for a house, you can't get another permit for another house. It's only one per lot.
well, what in our decision prevents you from, say, putting the agricultural structure there, and then at some point down the line, that turns into the boathouse and Bhutan's property?
Well, that's true. You don't need, agricultural structures don't need to be in any building envelope.
Yeah, but they don't always stay that.
I understand.
And I'm just wondering why we're approving two building envelopes
Think of it as one
without
building,
them being mutually exclusive.
think of it as one building envelope separated by a leach field, because that's what it is. So all primary structures and accessory structures have to be within those.
But I see nothing in our approval that says it has to be one or the other, one side or the other.
I
I mean,
guess,
hypothetically, if he wanted to build out over here, is there a concern?
There's no driveway access.
The challenge, of course, would be to get that driveway access, and possibly that might mean another wetlands permit. It might mean a bunch of other things, but does the board have a concern as far as whether the applicant builds over here or builds over here?
I'm not concerned about the location. I'm just concerned about us approving two building sites without saying one is mutually exclusive to the other. Because
But under the
then
regulations.
are we not authorizing structures that we might not be contemplating?
Right, but under the regulations, you can only have one primary structure.
I know that's a residential structure.
Right.
And I'm,
I mean, hypothetically, like with any, he could eventually put in an accessory apartment. Under the regulations, he could have a home occupation. I mean, but that's typical of any type of property.
I just haven't
Would you
seen us
feel,
approving.
would you feel better if this was just connected again like this?
No, we have two building envelopes. We've approved alternative building envelopes, but these aren't, I don't see anything here that talks about these as alternative envelopes. You can use one, but not the other.
how about, so the intention here is to have room for accessory structures, not the primary proposed house site is the primary proposed house site. I have no problem being restricted to having the primary house site on the west part of the building envelope. But if you want to build an equipment shed, where are you going to build it? And-
Well, do we need to approve that? If we don't, then that's just a zoning permit issue. I just don't want to,
Well, unless it has a building envelope, you're not allowed to build, right? So the whole reason to put that there is to have the ability to put outbuildings.
so you're talking about outbuildings that
Yep.
would otherwise be permitted under
And I have no
regulations.
problem restricting that, eastern
Okay,
portion to
all right.
outbuildings if that,
Understood
if
that
you-
way, I have no
if
issue
you have a
with that.
concern about it,
Okay.
really, yeah.
But that's not in here.
Yeah, I have no problem with putting it in there. No problem whatsoever. There's no plan or proposal to put the main house on the eastern part of that.
And if there was an accessory apartment, you would probably envision it being an upstairs portion of the garage or something?
Yep. No,
Well, and that would also require our further approval, would it not?
no, requires zoning permit. We've sized the septic system for.
Provided it was under 640 square feet or something like that?
There.
It would have to meet the regulations of either
Yeah.
30% or
Yeah.
30% or 60, or the 660.
Yep.
All right, no, I can live with that. I just think it needs to be tightened up a little.
Okay, I have no problem with that at all. So, three other things to talk about. Wastewater disposal, all the plans have been provided to you, and I do have a state permit for wastewater and potable water. The planning office also has those state permits. Well information, I provided a map of the state well logs that show that there's water in the area. I don't think anyone's come up with a dry well. There's varying yields from a gallon and a half to 100 gallons a minute, within 1,500 feet of each other, depending on depth or luck, I guess. Third thing is, my calculation is that we're around 7,000 square feet for added impervious surface, including driveway, garage apron, house footprint, or 6,500. And it doesn't trigger need for a formal engineered stormwater design, but we will comply with the Department of Environmental handbook for erosion control. And I think,
So what
That's
kind
it.
of access is there from the garage to the house? Is it not conceived as impervious in some way, shape, or form,
a path or steps, yeah.
but not impervious?
Well,
Or is that factored in?
I guess that would be impervious.
Well, depending on what you make out of it. If you mow it every week, it may
I
not
suppose
be.
if you made it a grass path, it's not
So,
impervious. Right?
does any of that calculus weigh into whether,
I did not add
The-
that
the
into.
math,
I did
whether
not
we're-
add that into the 6,500 square feet, but, if it's a 4-foot wide path times 300 feet, it's another,
1,200?
yeah,
And you're still okay?
well within,
Yeah, all right,
10,000 being the threshold.
yeah.
So unless there's any other questions, that's all I have to talk to you about.
Board members have any other questions?
I don't.
All right, I'll open it up to the public. Just please state your name.
Terry Harris, I'm a neighbor of Ted's.
Okay.
Ted and I spoke today earlier. The plat doesn't show the kind of a proposed well site for the new lot, and I guess the site plan does. Could you
Right.
point that out on the site
Yeah,
plan?
we put the site
for me?
plan up. expand right where your cursor is.
That symbol, large round symbol?
Yeah. So that well meets all the separation distances from the septic system and, you know, the adjacent, well, it's well away from the adjacent lot septic system, so meets all the isolation distances, and that general location has been approved in the state wastewater permit.
I would ask that to be put on the final plat as well, just to show that symbol in that location. Just because the final plat only shows water supply, well, it shows an existing drill well on adjacent property which serves their house, their Ted's current house. But it'd be nice to have, for the record, an idea of where a new well would be to serve lot 2.
Is that something usually found on recorded plats?
As much as you see building envelopes and driveways.
Would the wellhead shield impact adjacent properties? If it does,
I
then
don't know that the well, well, you see that round circle? So there's a sliver above. The septic system does, and there's a new rule, because those just used to happen out of, people used to find out about them when they went to, property owners that are impacted by, what do they call those?
Isolation strips.
Isolation zones get notified, and they have the opportunity to object, I guess, but there's not a requirement to not impact them. They happen all the time, and there is a procedure to both record, notify, and keep track of them now. There didn't used to be until very recently a procedure to.
I think when I got on the board, we did not allow any wellhead shields that impacted other property unless the property owner was there and was completely aware of it.
Right.
So are we talking about a potential impact, even if small, on a neighboring property?
Yep, and they've been notified of that.
And are they here or not here?
I've talked to them about it, and they are not here.
Okay,
And
so
had-
they
and had-
presumably know about it and therefore
and
do
had-
not object?
And had no problem with it, exactly.
All right, I accept that.
Go ahead.
Terry Harris again. I would be in favor of having those shown on the final plat as well. I mean, that's an important property rights effect on adjoining properties. I think it should be something that's just not on a site plan that gets buried in the zoning and planning files. It should be in the land records where anybody who's doing a reasonable search can find it easily or recognize it easily.
Mitch, is that needed on the plat, or is this?
Generally, no, those things are not generally on, they're not typically on a
Is
plat.
that considered an easement?
Although-
Does anybody know?
No, we can't give an easement that
It's not
impacts
an-
anybody else's land.
It's not,
Absolutely
it's not an easement.
Sometimes they'll, an area.
But any
where-
good
yeah.
attorney doing a title search should research these issues. That's not to say that every attorney practicing around here doing land stuff is a good attorney. But I'm not sure that's Ted's burden.
Go ahead.
George Bernard. For every client that I've brought in front of the board, these setbacks areas need to be identified, have needed to be. And there's two here. There's the one around the well, and then there's a protective zone around the septic. That has a greater influence on the neighbors space-wise. What's happening with the well shield, there's a minor impact crossing the line, and the neighbor would have to stay further away from that building septic to comply with the rules. So that's not gonna matter to the neighbor. The shield around the septic precludes the neighbor from putting a well.
Do we have
in
a
that
pointer
further
that we
space.
can give George, because I'm kind of missing?
All right, we're just
Exactly.
talking about, we're just talking about this area right
Yeah,
here.
yeah, that's the top.
That's the shield around the well that's proposed,
And then you have this particular area here, which is the
isolation,
isolation distance.
where the neighbor can't put a new water source in that space.
Because is that downstream or
Because it
downslope?
would be too close to the,
It's not downhill, but those are the state rules to make a shield like that.
Depending on, in part upon topography though, whether it's
Yep.
up or down.
It gets bigger as you go downhill, I believe, right, George?
Yeah.
Yeah.
so there are those impacts on the neighbor. Probably not gonna bother them where they're living on their land, but I've been required to show those on all plans. And it's good practice.
On plats that are filed,
Yep.
I, no problem doing that.
Okay.
We have no problem doing that.
My larger concern is with the stormwater. Just so I know how to ask for any client in the future, this presented arrangement of the end of a road, garage and space to where the house is gonna be built, there's a lot of disturbed soil, and not all of it will end out being impervious, but it'd be good to know that an example like this is clearly within the scope of the rules, and none of you have an issue with the arrangement, because I can see the same thing coming back for other applicants.
Okay, George, can you translate into stupid lawyer English?
When you go by that garage site with all your construction equipment,
We're
To
we're
get up
down,
to the
we're down
house.
on the lower
You're
part of the
talking
property.
about, you talking about this right here?
Yeah.
yep, that's the proposed garage. During the construction and development of this site, there's gonna be a lot of traffic going up through to the house site, a lot of disturbance. And same with the building of the mound and all of that for the septic. And if this arrangement falls within the lower limit of impact, because we're not counting a driveway all the way to the house site, and we're not counting all the disturbed soil that happens during construction, and it's simply what you end out with impervious, it'd be good to know that that's the interpretation.
Okay,
For one and all.
have you crossed swords with staff about interpretations, or
No,
is this
I'm
a
just-
state issue?
This is town, the town has their rules that kick in way before the state. So just how are we gonna apply it to everyone? That's what
My
I
guess
want to
is
know.
George is talking to other people in the town, and nobody on the board knows what he's really talking about. Except maybe Dennis.
I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
talking about like a temporary road to access,
Yeah,
that are we
okay.
calling not impervious surface, but it would be temporary, just to access the house during construction.
Well, in conversations with staff, not with this, but in general, I've heard disturbed surface thrown out as opposed to permanently impervious. And so if this application meets the rules with this set of criteria, I just would like to know that it does, because the same questions will be asked to the benefit of
Well,
others.
as a board member, I'm poorly prepared to give advice as to how exactly this is gonna be implemented in the construction phase. I feel completely incapable of dealing with that as a board member here, just deciding on the approvability or not of this issue.
I'm not sure you've had many stormwater permits to look at anyway so far, since it's been implemented.
Yeah.
But I do know that in presentations that have been made for other clients, we've shown the driveway going to the house and the space around the house garage arrangement and counted all of that. This has a discount in between. If the logic works, it's good to know. I can see where it applied beneficially to others.
All right, if I could,
There's no intention here to skirt the 10,000 square foot action for stormwater plan. I have 3,500 square feet left over. If you want to show a driveway up to that house site, I still don't meet the 10,000 square feet of impervious, requiring a stormwater design. I have stated, and I believe that the draft decision says that we'll follow the state stormwater handbook for construction sites, and we'll intend to do that.
You mentioned two particular things, and, if I may. You talked about stormwater, and the biggest issue, one, as Ted has said, this is below the thresholds of the town. However, the other thing you look at is how much is the stormwater being concentrated. And on this particular site, you really don't have a lot of concentration of stormwater. A lot of it is because it's actually being discharged in a very spread out area. And the other thing is erosion and sediment control. And we actually have a couple of different things. You reach over the 3,000 square foot, that's when you have to make use of the low-risk handbook. And then there's another threshold beyond the 10,000 range, which also this is not really going to quite reach. And it's really how much of that's going to be done at one particular time as well. So this should be, it should be fine with that particular one.
The key concern that I have is, with applicants that I have had an opportunity to deal with, the presentation is a house garage go together in a spot, and you drive to it. This is a choice not to.
Right.
And if this is fine, then that's fine. I just want to know that you're clear and comfortable with this, and wouldn't mind seeing it again.
Well, to my mind, I'm wondering why Ted wants to build a garage that may be 300 feet away from a house. But I'm happy to entertain, George, an application from you that's in similar ilk. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask if anybody else has comment from the public, otherwise.
Anybody from the board, Ron? Anybody else?
For any topic? I mean, anything related to the proposal? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just this application.
This application.
Going back to the plat, well, let me just, I'm just putting a scale on the plat, and it's about 80, it's about 80 feet from the corner of the garage proposed to the corner of the house. So, if you put in a 10-foot driveway, I mean, you've got 800 square feet. Again, Ted's not going to even begin to dent that maximum or minimum that he's required to treat impervious soils. But another point, or another question in my mind, if you go back to the plat, Mitch, if you would please.
You said the plat, not the...
Yes, you've got it there. There's no, the representation, the illustration of the 50-foot right-of-way is not in any way defined by measurements or ties to property corners or anything like that. It's just pictorial. And I think it's better practice to actually dimension it fully so that in 25 years or 50 years or beyond that, if there's ever an issue as to access to Lot 2, where the deeded right of way is, that it can be precisely reconstructed. And I'm sure Ron and Kevin LaRose, basically they have that information underlying what's drawn there. So it wouldn't be a big change to fully dimension the right-of-way.
So you're asking meets and bounds?
Yes, I mean, that's typically done.
Well, I'm not sure it's typically done because people always give easements over their own property, and usually those don't include meets and bounds. As long as it complies with our regulations, regardless of where exactly it is, doesn't seem important to us as a board.
Well, I have a practice in land disputes, and probably 50% of my practice is with access disputes, so I differ in my opinion with you. I think
Well,
it's very important, I
well,
think it's
we
equally
obviously
important to
want
the
to-
boundaries being fully depicted and defined.
But people are going to be buying those properties with complete knowledge of the easements, rights and accesses. That's a private property issue, to my mind, rather than us delineating meets and bounds by a survey. I don't think it's necessary.
Again,
Why do you do the boundaries then? So they're one and the same, they're very specific rights in property, they're critical rights in property.
Those are private property rights that can be dealt with by the people who are subdividing that property. They buy with full knowledge of what's going on there. That's their issue. The town doesn't have to get involved in that, as long as it complies with our regulations. That's one person's view, and I'm not gonna say anything more about it tonight. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Ron LaRose, since my name was dropped. Contrary to what Terry said, we generally put a note saying the right-of-way to be centered on a constructed road when it's fairly simple. The reason being, when we do the design of where this right-of-way is gonna go, lot division, we still don't know what's underneath the surface. And sometimes the contractors hit materials that will make them bump that road around. So we want the right-of-way to straddle the constructed road. Now, if we were doing a 10-lot, 50-lot subdivision, obviously we would have meets and bounds. This is a 2-lot subdivision coming from Silver Street in, and it's going over, starting with an existing drive. And now that existing drive is going to be extended to the east till it hits lot 2. And he might hit some other impervious material like ledge that we haven't seen, even in that wet area. And if they have to move around it, we want that right away to move with it. Because when Mr. Blumart sells or builds on lot 2, he or his successors are gonna know where that right of way is because the road's built. Maybe this is something we've done in small, couple lot, 3-lot subdivisions, not large ones where we have to define street road limits. So that's why.
Okay.
I do have a question. On the same picture, the red is the actual wetland boundary, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So why is there a little tip of wetland split by the, 'cause I thought you only built through the buffer.
If it's not, so they worry about contiguous wetlands, and that little blip of wetland is at the bottom of a slope where water comes down, and then there's actually some elevation beyond that where you, until you hit the main part of the wetland, and they're worried about contiguous wetland, not these little isolated pockets like that.
Okay, so that was, I thought that probably was contiguous and then the driveway
It's not.
built up
Right,
and
no,
made it no longer wetland.
It's not contiguous.
It's not
The
right.
state
Okay.
gave you a permit for it.
Right. It's in the buffer area. That little blip is actually considered, I think, in the buffer area as well. And the driveway's going through the buffer area, and that's the only wetland permitting that needed to be done.
Where'd Greg go?
Terry Harris again. So if I can get a clarification from Ron, if this is what's, when this final plat is recorded, this is gonna be the legal document which controls the location of that right of way. And I think what I'm hearing is if under construction, the contractor moves the center of the road, he's also gonna move the center of, obviously he's gonna want it to be the center of the right of way, so the right of way is gonna shift. Is that gonna be is it gonna be an as-built of whatever's constructed out there? I mean, you've got to get this nailed down now, it would seem to me.
Well, it's pretty much nailed down because he has the wetlands. You can't,
Yeah,
you're not
that's
gonna
what-
go into the wetlands any farther.
And not only that, if
I
you
would
end up
assume if you have
editing,
to move the
Yeah.
driveway within the right of way, that you're not moving the right of way. So I don't see how you could keep it centered on the driveway. I could see why the driveway might have to move to miss something, but I don't see why the right of way would automatically move with it, because you're going to potentially impact further into the wetland if you do that. So you've gone to great lengths in order to specify the right of way and what the wetland disturbances are, to put that in there. So I would think that is relatively fixed, even though the driveway within that area may shift around as necessary.
Truth be told, the driveway is actually more fixed than the sides of the right-of-way, because we have a wetlands permit that says, here's how much wetlands. I suppose you could go further away from the wetlands with your driveway, but I basically paid to go across these little slivers of wetland with the driveway.
Just the driveway width, not the right of way width.
Driveway width, right?
Okay.
They don't, the wetlands people don't really care about the right-of-way, they care only about the driveway, surface that you're, yeah, because the rest is undisturbed.
And if you didn't put the driveway, at least the pieces that impact the wetland, if you didn't put it right where you had agreed with the wetland people where it was gonna go, then you would have to go back to the wetland people and reassess the area.
So, right.
But you're approving, excuse me, Terry Harris again, but you're approving the location of that right-of-way tonight. So I'm just, I guess I'll be quiet, but that's the fact of the matter. You don't want it floating around out there.
Mr. Chairman, it's almost 8:30, and we actually have 4 other applications, at least, or 3 tonight. I don't want to cut anybody off, but I would like to suggest we need to wrap this up sooner or later.
The board members have any other questions?
I don't think it's the board.
We have a draft decision.
I guess I did have a question on a couple of the conclusions in the draft.
I would actually move to take the decision up in deliberative session, or at least after the hearing, so we can move on with these other applications.
Well, I would like to ask a question about one of these statements in the conclusions while the applicant is still here. I don't remember which number it was. I'm trying to rush them along. There was a comment about the building envelope being, there being some moderate slopes in the building envelope in order to try to save some other special areas, I guess. So by moderate slopes, those are not the 15 to 25%, right?
there's like a touch of it that does get onto the 15
Because
to
my
20.
question would be, what's the point? You can't build on 15 to 25%, right? So what's the benefit of putting the building envelope into an area that has a 15 to, I mean, I understand why you're trying to save some other more critical areas, wetland boundaries or whatever. But what benefit does it provide to have the building envelope on one of these steeply sloped areas if you can't actually build there anyway?
Well, how much of it is steep on that second building envelope?
It's just an area up in here, along the edge here.
Way up the top, yep.
And I mean, the proposed site is pretty much right at the top of the building envelope, which would imply you would have to be building on those steep slopes.
Yeah, if you,
That's proposed, I understand that.
yeah, the plan is to build a hillside, into the hillside, and have a walkout basement. And
Okay,
Tho-
so it
those-
would be
tho-
built
those-
into the hill as opposed to hanging over the hill and needing stilts.
Right.
Okay. Okay. And the other question I had was wording, but I think that's more of a question for Mitch that we could take up in deliberative session.
The only other comment I would offer is on finding of fact number 9. It's an existing 3-bedroom residence, not a 4-bedroom residence, or a 2-bedroom accessory apartment.
So Dick, did you get
Existing
an answer to
three-bedroom.
your question?
Yes, it
Because
is.
I'm not sure I did.
Well, my answer, what my question was, you know, how could you use that space? And it makes sense to me that if he's going to build into the space, you know, cutting into the slope in order to make the house makes more sense to me than having a house built out over a.
You're saying, it wasn't part of your question, you can't build into that space anyway?
I assumed if it was a big drop-off, you wouldn't be able to build
If
into
it
the
happens to
space.
be the very steep slopes, which would be considered primary resource, then you can't build into it. If it's one of the moderate ones, you try to avoid it if you can.
Okay, the plan has to conform as best.
This is not a cliff. If it falls in the 15 and 25%, I would say it barely
We're talking
meets,
about a pretty flat area.
barely meets the 15 up top there. It doesn't, it's
Okay.
not a cliff. Mitch has been out there.
So Craig, you made a motion?
Sure. Motion by silence. Yes, I would, I'd actually move to, as the public exhausted its comment, I didn't want to try and cut them off. But we do have to move on.
I think so.
So it sounds like I'd move to close the public hearing and take this up in deliberative session.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll go back to being a regular board member at this point. This was just so no one gets the impression that things go easy when you're on the board. So you do.
All right, up next, Sherry Willett and Deborah Campbell for final plat review for proposed two-lot subdivision.
Just one people, just remember to sign it.
So who's gonna be? You are? Okay.
We're on the rules.
How you doing?
Good.
You have it brought up too much?
I've got that one front. Is this the ones you want to show? I've got the.
How far away is this from the Bloomhart property?
Not too far.
Half a mile, quarter mile? Another east-facing road off Silver Street?
I had not attended any previous hearings on this, so I'm not sure where the two ladies were on this, so, they have gone to Florida, so here I am. Just a quick overview. This is on the, I'm sorry, man. This is on the south side of Mead Farm Road, and it also fronts on Silver Street. It's about 2 miles south of the village. They have 10 acres. They created a 3-acre lot and a 7-acre lot. The 7 acres being with their existing home. The lot they want to develop is the 3-acre lot fronting on Silver Street and Mead Farm Road. There- Excuse me?
Just to let you know, you can have this up here if you want.
Okay.
Point this out there.
All right. So,
This is their existing 7-acre lot, and this is proposed 3-acre lot.
the septic site is in the northeast corner of the lot to be developed. You can see the building envelope, it's there against the easterly boundary of this 3-acre lot. What else do I need to? There's an existing field drive off from Mead Farm Road that they're gonna use, or wanna use for their access to this building envelope. We have submitted the wastewater application to the state. Have not heard back from them. Their pile is deep, so I'm not sure when we'll hear back from them. We don't anticipate any problems with a wastewater permit being issued. So, are there other things I should enlighten you on?
So the driveway is just gonna come right straight off there, right up to the,
Right there off Mead Farm Road into the building envelope.
okay?
The applicant asked if they could have a little bit of variation as to where that building, where the driveway would be, whether they end up building here or somewhere in it. So the driveway may end up being something like this, or may end up being something like this, depending on the house.
Could you repeat that, please? What you just said about the driveway?
Well, the driveway will be in here
Yep.
and go to the building over. And the reason why, as explained to me by the applicant, and Ron, please chime in, I'm just trying to help out with this, is that the applicant just wanted the opportunity, whether the driveway goes here or comes out like a little bit here, depending on where exactly in the building envelope, in the future someone wishes to build a house. And they just wanted that flexibility.
It's an oak, overgrown old meadow, and in this area between Mead Farm Road and building envelope, it's fairly flat. So if one wanted to do something other than a straight arrow driveway, they could put a slight curve into it off from Mead Farm Road into the, wherever the house site might be, into the building envelope.
And this map here shows the contours. Well, are they 2 foot or 1 foot contours? I don't know.
2 foot.
2 foot, so you can get a sense of the, how flat the property happens to be. And sir, can you just state your name?
Sure, Scott Webb.
Okay.
So I'm not seeing any indications of a well or a well shield or a septic keep out area. What's the proper term?
That's on the site plan.
There's a drilled well in the
That's it.
site plan, yeah,
Okay.
with a shield.
Just pull that. It's actually showing on the plan.
And do we usually do a final when we still have something that's termed a proposed septic site? I mean, don't we normally, before we approve a final, don't we have to have a fairly certain assurance that that site will indeed be
Well,
able to handle the septic?
basically, the regulations talk about having a proposed design. But in recognition that sometimes approval from the state can be a bit of a while, but this decision could be set up in such a way that should the septic system have to be redesigned, they can come back.
Can you explain the proposed curtain drain that's within the septic easement?
Well,
It's on the site
I
plan.
probably can't.
Okay.
My son is the engineer. He's not here. I'm sure it was put to intercept the runoff. There's a ridge that goes north and south near that eastern boundary of that
Boy, do we not have a
3-acre lot. So
a
that,
pointer anymore?
excuse me?
That's not,
So,
Yeah, we don't, unfortunately, it was,
boy, can the town invest in that instead of maybe laptops, but $5 pointer?
I
It
will,
would really help audience members and us. Sorry. I was just trying to figure out where you're talking about, because you're gonna have the advantage of having a pointer to show us exactly where you're talking
So
about.
where is it?
There's a proposed curtain drain that's shown between the mound system and
I
the
see.
septic easement that's basically somewhat close to
it's right
the
here.
property line.
and you can see to the right of that ridge line that runs north and south. It'll minimize the runoff into that leach field area, so not to oversaturate that mound.
Can I ask a question related to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Scott Webb, is there, you mentioned like a septic
Are
shield?
you a neighbor?
Yeah, we're the closest neighbor, Webb, right across the road. And
North, south?
north. And the septic shield that you mentioned in the earlier discussion, how big is that? Because we're concerned about the location of the septic in relation to our well, which is about 100 feet away.
That septic system was designed to make sure your well was outside that isolation shield.
And what's that distance?
Can't tell you, I'm not a
It
designer.
depends whether you're uphill or downhill.
That's
So
true.
looking at the contour lines, you mentioned it's a relatively flat area.
Yes,
But that field where this is proposed does flood occasionally because of the culvert, which erroneously says metal and now it's plastic. When that closes up, this field floods. And I'm concerned about the location of the septic. When it does flood, you've got a curtain drain. You've got water coming down from different directions, and we're downriver of it. What we would prefer is if the septic was closer to Silver Street. That would eliminate this problem.
the soils, the water table is much higher there. It did not allow that. That's why the septic system is here.
And that is your well? Yeah,
Yeah.
been there 20 years.
So you can see the dotted line, I think, for the isolation shield, which does show the well being outside. But it does extend up. It does get cut off at the top of the picture there.
I don't think we have any authority to deny anything or require anything more than the state requires. And those well shield regulations were changed like 5 years ago. They were tightened up. And we don't have any authority to overrule those. Those are state regulations.
So a flooding event, there's gonna be problems.
I can't talk about that, and it's a state issue.
So there's a culvert running on both sides of Mead Farm Road, right at the end of that septic mound. I mean, that in and of itself,
You talking about a culvert over here?
excuse me. The corner of the property right here, there's a gully that runs right along Silver Street. So right at the end of this septic mound, you've got a gully, so in a high water event, water comes down Mead Farm Road, it goes down through this culvert, but there's potential for problems. There's our well, there's our paved driveway, there's their driveway. So we're extremely close. I know you mentioned they didn't get the perk test over there probably for the septic, but that would eliminate, I don't know, maybe any different kind of septic system.
Well,
Above ground or something.
it's a 30 inch mound, which is pretty, relatively high mound.
I think another thing along with this road, it's a dirt road, it's private, it's similar to your town roads in maintenance. Needs to have a grader probably on it once a year to pull out of these ditches, to re-accent the ditches so that the water stays in the ditches and runs towards the culverts instead of flooding over the road towards people's property. The ditches need to be recaptured because there's relatively little change in elevation from the center line of the road to the center of the ditch. You know. So any amount of rain that you get coming down Mead Farm Road is going to seek its own path, and if it's fairly level there, it's going to spill out into the road. So the ditches need to be recaptured. It's just an observation.
Okay.
My name's Paul Lamberson, I live on Mead Farm Road, and two questions, comments. One, on the ditch work, we have a valid and current and up-to-date stormwater permit on that road. So any observations or concerns about the status of the ditch is just an opinion, because that's not what the engineer's report says. It says we're in good shape with our stormwater permit. And my observation is, not only do you have this, I'll use my good pointer. Not only do you have this terrain on this side, but you're gonna have a driveway on this side. And that just seems like you're really increasing the opportunity for channeling. With that in mind, I'd want that driveway to be farther away from this mound to provide some percolation. I don't want the, you know,
When that driveway is redefined for vehicular traffic, they're gonna have to put in a larger culvert than what's there right now. And that would alleviate any ponding of water between the
their culvert
road.
right there,
Pardon me?
the existing culvert at the end of their lot.
I think it needs to be cleaned out and you re-accent that ditch so that when the road is gravelled and put in there and built up, the water is directed towards a culvert under the driveway and down to the bigger culvert that goes across Mead Farm.
Okay, and that becomes this owner's responsibility, not the homeowners association?
That's right. That's the way I look at it. I may be speaking out of turn for the successors on that lot.
Okay. So are you acknowledging that as part of this subdivision, a larger culvert needs to be put in by the applicant?
I'm not going down that road. We're here to show you a subdivision. If the town requires a certain size, diameter, and length of culvert to be put under that road when it's improved, we put it on the map.
You can just clarify, when it's improved, when the lot's improved or when the road's worked on? When the lot is improved.
Other towns say that when you, that's a field drive. I call it a field drive, a farmer's drive, nothing more, nothing less.
Yep.
But if I'm gonna build there, I wanna improve that driveway, width, height, and all that. And then some towns require, you'll put in a culvert that's 18 or 24 inches, and it'll be so long at the mouth of that road where it intersects either a town road or a private road.
And how
Maybe
does
your
Hinesburg-
association.
No, how does Hinesburg do that requirement?
The town could require, the board could require a standard road
Is Mead
culvert.
Farm Road a private road?
It's a
Yes.
private road.
Private.
So we're not gonna burden your neighbors with any additional obligations. I guess my question is, are you proposing as part of this application that you'll undertake the obligation of increasing the size of any culvert?
I wouldn't have any problem putting it on there. I'm looking for some guidance from the town. What do you recommend that I put on there?
We're not the engineers here.
So,
Well,
we're-
may I ask, just, I'm also the point person with the state on our stormwater permit for the road. And it's sort of linked to this conversation right now, because the performance of the system is how's the ditch work once there's another residence, and et cetera. Is it this venue or process? How does this new lot become a member of this stormwater project?
So we would require that they become a member of your road association,
Okay?
for one. Now, as far as the engineering issues of how much water is flowing through that ditch and how big of a culvert, I mean, as Greg said, we're not engineers. And, you know, if we said
A
16,
lot of guys are
18,
engineers, probably not hydraulic engineers.
we're not civil engineers, at least.
And even
So-
though those who are civil engineers, we haven't done the study to
Right,
see
so
what
my
this should be.
question, I guess,
We're
would
depending
be,
on Mr. LaRose.
you know, is there some, you know, an engineered stormwater study document that could be provided to the town so that we could, you know, attempt to at least include it as part of the findings that we're collecting, and then have some idea, you know, what makes sense for the culvert that would go through there, because we're not, it's not a new road. If this were a whole new subdivision, that would all be part of the subdivision and the engineering of the road. Now we're just tacking on to an existing road. But clearly the driveway we're talking about is going to bisect a primary drainage way out to Silver Street. And you know, so as one board member, I would agree that, you know, we do need to be careful that that doesn't back up the whole system. But at this point, we don't have the information that we need to, you know, even take a reasonable guess at what size of culvert needs to be there.
Is the culvert backing up now that's under there?
Not too much, but you've got an unimproved field, you know, that's soaking up water for the most part. And I guess the timing of this is that our last renewal was in November of 2015, when, you know, the engineer who was renewing our stormwater compliance wasn't looking at that as a new lot. He saw his field drive, is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just kind of have the opinion that it hasn't seen the set of talented eyes that it might need to see and be measured and analyzed.
What I can do is talk to a contractor, show him what we're dealing with, propose width of driveway, and what he would recommend, what he would do for a size of culvert, and put it on our plot plan.
It sounds like this is not an application that is as time sensitive as others, so I'm almost hearing the applicant inviting us maybe to continue this for a brief period of time to allow him to consult with somebody.
You should probably see if there's any other open issues to deal with, right?
Well, I wasn't moving to
Oh.
close the meeting.
Well, actually, if I can make one recommendation here, because since there is already a stormwater plan, if you can provide us, and if you can provide it to me, I'll make sure it gets to Mr. LaRose, or if the two of you want to.
You bet.
But actually, the town would prefer to also get a copy of that. It should be what is designed should take into account what's actually there. And I would just recommend even having an engineer look at it to make sure that it would make sense.
And Mitch, I would note, Mead Farm Road goes back, it goes back a ways, 4 or 5 properties beyond this. I'm not sure any of those are subdividable, but I think everybody involved in Mead Road should have an interest in this, and it would give an opportunity to comment on going forward issues.
I mean, I'm here because I was mailed information, I don't know, and I'm not a direct abutter, so I kind of hope all the neighbors were informed, but I don't know what the process would be.
It depends if there's like a common area or something like that, that would be on it, but I'm not sure if all the neighbors were.
Okay.
But if this is continued, we could send out make sure that we can send out some additional notices to the other people.
It would make sense to get a community plan for any future stormwater
And
issues.
just for your education, there is one sizable lot, the former Tufo property, which is 115 acres off of.
Oh, that way at the back?
Yeah, so
Okay,
that's the one that would be most
Yeah.
likely to be
Yeah,
subdivided
sure.
in the future.
Now, does all the water from all the properties along Mead Farm go down Mead Farm and eventually
No,
into the
this
ditch by
is-
Silver Street?
Well, this is, I'd say this is about a high point, right, because there's a culvert here. and
Mitch,
there's
could we get the context
there's a
back up? That would actually show that
Actually, I
other
wanna
property?
mention one little thing on this. What you have right over here
No, I've got it.
is on,
Well,
is
I've got
on
it here.
our
I see it.
maps
I
as a
just
tributary
might help
to the
them.
plat. And that's a low spot, and if I'm not mistaken,
But there's a lot of
yeah,
property.
there's like a high point somewhere in here where everything pretty much goes
Plus
here.
this.
And
Okay.
that's gonna
Like
be
the state of
draining
Iowa.
here.
And
And
that's
there's
part
going
of
to
it.
be more that's
I
localized in
didn't
this area.
recognize that. That's
Which-
like 150
and-
acres. Isn't it?
not ganging up on it, but this is pretty darn flat right here. This is kind of the plateau of the little divide. So the notion of neighbors concerned about where is that gonna go is spot on.
All right, well, so you comment that Mr. LaRose is gonna take a look at.
Are there any other options where the septic could go?
We dug how many, I'm not sure. Test pits all over that field, the problem was a high water table.
Yep.
State says you must maintain so many inches from the top of the ground to the water table. And this is the only one area that we could ensure we can get and that's why that's so long. It's a shallow well, water table.
And they couldn't do an above-ground septic closer to Silver Street?
Well, this is a mountain right here. So it doesn't matter what it is, you still gotta be up so many inches above that water table.
Yep.
That
And-
makes it expensive.
Right.
I
'Cause-
did one.
And I had a question about, there was a discrepancy between the map we got on August 22nd and the one here at the meeting, September 11th. Because it shows that house being a two-bedroom, and I don't know if it's related to the size of the septic, proposed two-bedroom, single-family residence. And then on here it shows the building envelope being 150 feet square, and on this one it shows a rectangular shape. And I'm just wondering about what would cause.
The site plan that goes to the state, they do not want to build an envelope. You put a square on there for the building. But for the town, they're looking for a building envelope. So in here, you have a square for the house,
Yep.
the septic here. But on there, you probably got
Instead
the
of having a
the
private
envelope.
conversation that
Yep.
we can't follow, could you,
So
Okay.
it's,
or Mitch, maybe you may know what he's talking about.
will it be a two-bedroom house that's on the final thing?
We're not regulating whether it's 2 or 3 bedrooms, that's governed by the septic size.
So wouldn't you know that? Like, you said it's a smaller septic, so it would only be a two-bedroom?
No, I didn't say that.
That's not at this stage, they're not committing themselves to
Okay.
any particular size.
We have heard that.
On here- and there it
So what,
says it.
what did
Oh,
you
and
put
here
the
it says.
permit in for? A 3-bedroom?
Well, we pay, excuse me, the client pays a minimum for a 3-bedroom apartment. That's what the fee is. So it went in for a 3-bedroom design.
Yeah.
If they only wanted 1 or 2 bedroom, but says they're gonna pay for the full fee of 3 bedrooms, well, this, going with this design.
Okay.
Because this says
And it's more
two-bedroom.
saleable.
These
says-
maps are different. Why are they different?
I know,
When
different
did you
dates.
receive them? Or where'd you get
This
them?
was the one mailed to us a couple weeks ago,
The septic is
dated,
moved, everything is different.
August 22nd. This one is September 11th. And
I'm not, because when we
There's two
mail out,
different-
we don't generally mail out plans. The public oftentimes comes into our office to get the plans.
One's a site plan and one's a plat. Those are two different maps you're
Oh, is
looking
that-
at, I believe.
Yeah,
Well,
they are looking at two different plans.
That's a,
That,
that's a
that's,
site plan that you have. I believe that's a survey plat. They
This
kind
guy's
of
got his reading glasses on.
two different, they have, if you look at the plat, which is not that one, it's the
no,
other one.
actually, going back and forth.
It actually has a building envelope, that one that's up here, it actually has a rectangular building envelope that, the house could be anywhere in that building envelope, which,
The building envelope there, and this is the existing lot with the building envelope that's gonna be there.
Right, they're showing a proposed area where the septic would be. The site plan actually shows the details for well and septic,
right.
that guy.
it sounds like the septic can't go anywhere else, so. But we're just wondering if it's gonna be like a two-bedroom, or, we don't want it to be a behemoth.
We're not reviewing that.
Yeah.
they can't support that.
The only limits the town has on that is 35 feet height, that's the maximum height building.
But what I do
and
think we
septic.
have is effort to control stormwater that can have an impact on, mitigating some of your concerns, is making sure better stormwater management.
So do we wanna continue this till they come back with something for the?
I think that's where Greg was going.
So, this is for final, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so this is final plat review, so if there's information that you need, you have to continue.
Yeah, I think we should note that this had a sketch plan review. I don't remember there were any of these issues that came up then, but that doesn't preclude neighbors from raising issues now. Although, it's unfortunate they just surfaced now. But we have to deal with it, and I would move to continue.
Do you have a date that we could?
We could continue this to the November 7th. We
What
can
does the
meet-
applicant want?
Do you think you'd have time to get the information you need by then?
That's 3 weeks from today.
Meet with him.
Or Ron, would you rather have it 5 weeks from today?
Pardon me?
Would you rather have it 3 weeks from today or 5 weeks from today?
3 weeks is fine.
That would be November 7th.
Okay. Election night. Remember election night a year ago? We always have a meeting on election night. The
That's
first Tuesday in November.
Do the board members have any other questions before we,
I do not. Make a motion to continue.
till November,
7th, or if you could, if you want, make it November 21st if you'd
They're
like.
asking for the
November 7th? We
7th.
don't have much on November.
November 7th, right now, there's the continuation of the rec fields and one other new hearing. Conditional use for expansion, actually shifting a non-complying structure.
I think this can be quick, so I would move to,
Are we just sending them away to develop the access, stormwater, deal with the access stormwater issues? Is that all we're?
that's all I hear.
Yeah, I think
That's
that's
to
the main
resolve
thing.
any issues about culverts and water flow.
And compatibility with the stormwater permit that Mead Farm Road has, is that?
Hmm?
Yes.
Is that,
And I would request also that they're looking at that curtain train, because it also appears to be flowing north into the Mead Farm Road ditch. How much water do they expect to collect in that and dump into that ditch? Because I think right now, that water is flowing out across that property, right?
Yes.
Not necessarily into the ditch, so not just looking at the water that's coming down the road, but also taking into account this new curtain drain that's collecting the water off that ridge, and directing it toward that ditch. So whoever the engineer is looking at that, make sure they're taking that water into account as well.
With the, also understanding where the septic system is proposed, which is an integral part of that storm, there's potentially a conflict between the stormwater and the septic, and they should look at that.
Let's say it again.
If that floods, it should show up in the soil test pit, shouldn't it? I don't understand how that.
I mean, it's not floodplain, right? There's no mapped flood areas there.
but Ron, I think the question for you is there a potential stormwater issue with the septic system? Is the stormwater, the potential flow of stormwater along the southern portion of Mead Farm Road, is that going to have an effect on your on the septic design? Am I capturing that right?
So we're gonna move it to the November 7th? I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ted, sure, are you sure none of that water of your property is coming down there?
Move to reopen Ted's.
It's a half a mile, so maybe 8/10.
Oh, good, some people are waving. A lot of community involvement in these small subdivisions.
All right, up next, Carol Ann Spade and Carol Taggart for conditional use review for a camp conversion.
Yes, good evening. I'm Carol Ann Spade, and this is Carol Taggart. And we are putting in an application to convert and upgrade property located on 61 Cove Road in Hinesburg, from a seasonal camp to an approved year-round residence. The intention is to remove the existing camp and build a new energy-efficient two-bedroom, which has a state-approved determination for a septic system. The
You
home-
actually have a septic permit.
Can I just interrupt? Cove Road, I've seen a lot of these camp conversions. I don't remember Cove Road, and we don't seem to have a context map. Is this off Pond Road, heading into Williston?
It's off of Pond Brook Road,
Pond Brook Road, okay.
And, and
Heading toward Richmond, how far down on the left is
actually,
it?
it's Pond Brook Road.
Southwest Shore.
Off of Southwest Shore Road.
Off Southwest Shore. So it's off the Richmond Road then?
Right, this is, this over here is the bottom portion of Lake Iroquois.
Yeah, okay. So I don't remember ever being out here. So I'm not familiar with the exact area. Okay,
That's where the big turn is.
okay, all right. Yeah, so that's Pond Road?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Pond
Pond
Road.
Brook, okay.
Okay.
Richmond, okay,
Well, isn't that North Wellston?
yeah, okay.
Yeah, North Wellston.
Okay, so the home will have a 960 square foot footprint and 1,920 square feet of living space, including a deck and covered porch. Both the upper and lower levels will consist of matching the 960 square foot floor space.
So basically, you have a 960 square foot footprint, but that would be a 40 by 24, and the proposed building here is 32 by 24, so it's a little smaller,
Yeah,
but it'll, just want to clarify that. It's 24 times 32 times 2 is what you're proposing in terms of the building, and plus the deck, which would be the 8 by 24.
thank you. The shoreline protection approved footprint is designed as not to impede on the existing setback requirements for Lake Iroquois. By extending south, we are also minimizing our non-porous surfaces on the lot. We believe that this project will have a positive impact on the surrounding properties by utilizing a simple, harmonious design, quality craftsmanship, and updated utilities. It is a very exciting project, and we thank you for your consideration.
So are there any uphill neighbors of yours whose view shed you might be impacting?
No.
30 acres of common land.
Okay. Because I don't have a context map, I don't see that, but, okay. That's an important consideration, good.
Do you have this picture? Where's the location?
I think I have that picture, but it doesn't show. It doesn't give me a map of the area.
But it's below the road, right? Isn't it?
Yes,
Well,
it's
it's
below the road.
But it's gonna be 2 stories, so it's gonna get significantly taller than the current.
Yes, it will not reach 35 feet.
Understood.
Okay.
But your current camp looks, it's amazingly low.
It is.
I mean, the actual door actually has a little bump up on it so that you can stand up while you're walking the door.
You got it.
So
So
one of
it
the
will be
staff
bigger.
comments was the overhead wire,
Yes.
that that'll just have to be redirected.
Exactly. We have to talk to the electric company. Yeah.
And that's servicing the adjacent house?
Yes, our neighbor to the north.
And septic-wise, you're getting a permit from the state that will update whatever was there before?
We already have the.
And presumably that's going to improve what was there before?
Yes.
What was there before?
A drum.
And what's going to be done with that? Is it going to be crushed and?
It'll be taken care of in a ecologically and appropriate way.
Okay. And your water, you're not on town there.
We're not on
You
town.
come out of the lake with a filter or?
We have water there is a pipe that goes to another area that was historically, and we've gone back in the records to find it, rights for water were given to 61 and 62 Cove Road in the past, back in the early 60s, late 50s, when it was finalized by there was an association, the Southwest, the Southwest Lake Iroquois Association.
Okay, so what is your existing water proposal? Just to continue that,
Yes.
and staff deems it sufficient?
They've received a permit from the state.
That was permitted too.
Yes, that's
Okay.
part of the permit. I believe it is a well on an adjacent property that they have access to.
And what about winter maintenance? How many houses or structures are accessed year-round, or actually even seasonally, by this road? I just don't know it.
When we turn off from Cove Road, we would be the first property.
Cove Road is that's a private association on that? I can't remember.
No, well,
Cove Road, go ahead.
It's not a town road.
It's the South Shore Association.
Southwest Shore.
So you participate in that,
Yes.
Yes.
and then beyond that, Cove Road people aren't participating in your segment.
There's just our 61 and then next door.
So what's the deal with that?
It's, right now, it's a year-round property next door.
61, do you have any agreement?
well, south of us, which
to
is
deal
the
with-
year-round.
Do you have an agreement to
Actually,
deal with that?
both.
To deal
Well,
with,
you and a neighbor share that access,
yes, we do.
so do you have a formal agreement?
Well,
If I'm not mistaken, and is Mark still here, or, okay. Isn't Cove Road part of the same road association, home association as Southwest Shore Lane, or Southwest Shore Road?
Yeah, Mark Masters. The Southwest Shore Association, Campers Association, has 4 roads. The main road artery is Southwest Shore Road, and then there's 3 spur roads off of that: Cove Road, Pikes Point Road, and Pump Road.
So does that association agreement deal with all the spurs?
Yes, in the bylaws.
And everybody's responsible in the spur for their own maintenance?
Yes, the association is responsible for the maintenance of them, and about half of the association members roughly are year-round homes, and they...
Okay, so the main agreement takes care of the spur here?
For the maintenance,
Yeah,
in the bylaws it does, yes.
okay, all right. So it sounds like that exists, right?
That is the landowner, by the way.
So you have a site plan here, proposal option 2.
yes. And it's,
Am I missing option 1?
This is, there was this really large document that they had sent to the state shorelines people. And rather than give you the entire which is in the entire document is in the Dropbox, but instead of giving you a whole bunch of information, it just, the document that you're looking at there just kind of concentrates what they're working on. Option 1 had it going 90 degrees the other way, and it's a design they decided they weren't going to use.
So we're going with this one.
Correct.
option 2, yeah.
Okay.
It makes better use of the land and the slope
Right.
that's involved on the land.
Okay.
The challenge of those type of, those are schematics, that when you actually try to measure stuff out on the schematics, they didn't quite actually work as well as the survey, using a survey, which is what I have up on the screen right now.
And the parking's existing gravel parking that's there today.
It's dirt parking.
Can you go over the math of the square footage again?
The math of the square.
Yeah, what they
The
have.
960 square feet.
Well-
And then you mentioned,
Right.
and then how much of the, and then how many square foot of the building?
Right, there are 3 different numbers. One is the building itself here, this existing seasonal residence. You have a deck that's over here, and then you have an area over here, which is a gravel patio. And the applicants are proposing to remove all of that and put in, basically, all of that is, I think it's 996 square feet, I have that on another document, and put in something back that's 960 square feet. So overall, because gravel is considered an impervious surface as well, they're actually going to be reducing the overall impervious on the lot by a tiny, tiny amount.
Does that include the driveway too, the new driveway?
There is no-
There's no new driveway. Oh, and, oh, okay.
You walk down the road.
So,
Basically, this is the roadway over here, they park in this particular area
okay.
over here, and then walk down some steps that they have.
Okay.
And the important part that you need to know is in terms of lot coverage, they're not increasing the lot coverage on this. Basically, they are reducing lot coverage by a little bit, extending the setbacks from the lake. The one thing that they're reducing is there's already a non-conforming distance from this right-of-way that's over here. And actually, let me point it out here. There's a non-conforming distance here that they're going to shorten a little bit. But we are going to, here's the existing deck, here's the corner of the building, and you can see how they're shifting the building further from the lake. So they're improving in terms of the lake setback, they're maintaining a setback of, it says on one of the plans, 19 feet, 20 feet, somewhere in that range. They're not basically creating less of a setback over there. They're proposing to, they need to, in order to get those, they're shifting this back a little bit to take this non-conforming setback to the right-of-way, which only serves one additional lot over here by a few feet. And that's how they're kind of reorientating this. But there happens to be, it's the building, the deck, and the gravel area that's in this area here.
Okay.
And the 960 square feet is first floor plus second floor, right? So it's not really, the footprint is not.
No.
No,
That's footprint.
How many
That's the
square feet
footprint.
is
And
the
they're putting
new
a second
house
floor
gonna
on,
be?
so it's doubling the floor.
Okay.
And it's not even 960, it's gonna be a, I put it in the report, I forget the exact number, but basically it's, instead of being a 24 by 40 building,
Right.
the plan that they've provided, that's been provided to you, is a 24 by 32 foot building, 2 floors of that, and an 8 foot by 24 deck. That's what's being proposed.
what's the total square footage of that proposed building? 2,000 square feet?
It's less than that.
19 something.
That's where I couldn't get
this
960
different?
times 2 is less than 1,900. That's
Well,
where I
what's
was.
it done?
Right, that's, but that deck is, well, yeah, the 24 by, I had it in the report. I mean, if not, you know what?
Close. 960 times 2 is 18, is that 19?
It's 1920.
Yeah, 32 times 24 times 2. It's 1,536 square feet of livable space of the building itself.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I was,
Yeah.
Yeah, it
you
could be
said
confusing.
1,900 and I was like,
Yeah.
that didn't
Yeah.
match up. Got it.
So,
How tall is the current structure? Was that in the, too?
It's in the information. It's not a tall structure.
8 feet.
yeah, that's funny, I mean. This will
This
be,
will be under 35, it might be 33 feet.
actually, on one, what's proposed is going to be, on the downhill side. Let's see, on the downhill side, it's gonna be 32, I think, or,
Eric, Denise,
yeah, go ahead.
can I chime in? I think what we were going for was, being it's a slope, we were shooting for around an average of 30 to 32 feet from that center point. It's a fairly odd-shaped lot, so doing our best to get this as close as possible for you guys. But we do certainly understand the 35-foot height.
That's from, isn't 35 from the average?
It's from the average perimeter, and what they're gonna have on the uphill side is a difference of between 6 and 10 feet.
Then currently.
Can you,
Going proposed.
hold up that, no, the picture of the existing house?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is, I can find it.
Back page.
And that's how far from the driveway now? Quite a ways?
You talking
Those
about,
those are the stairs that you see, right?
Yes, you see the stairs.
So it's quite a ways downhill from the driveway?
Yep.
Or the road or whatever?
Other people don't want to park next to their house either.
Yeah.
More exercise.
So is the first floor elevation of the proposed house gonna be the same as the existing?
Roughly, yes.
So is it still gonna be kind of built up on like stilts or something?
Yeah, or
Okay.
the foundation.
Oh, it's still snow.
It's on a variety.
Like, so I mean, you can kind of, there's a few sets of stairs.
It'll essentially work out like a walkout basement home built into a hillside, but the first story, there's no full basement under it. It's almost like, if you were on the lake side, it would be like a crawl space.
Okay.
And the first story, and then the second story would be more towards at grade with where the road is
Right.
located.
and also the plan that you provided shows that some of the second story is going to be in this roof area as well.
Yeah,
And the peak of the house runs kind of along the shoreline, right?
yes.
Not pointed at the shore.
Right.
The broad face there is the lake. Towards the south.
So what's facing the shoreline won't be a big, even if it's built up on some foundation, it won't be a two-story.
Well, you would, it would,
It's gonna be kind of 2.5 stories.
Yeah, you'll see the roof and stuff, but
Yeah.
yeah, it won't be a, okay.
You're right, though, from the lake, it will look like a 2.5 story. There's a half,
Well, I think you'll see the roof line is part of that. The roof, the ridge line is parallel to the lake shore, I think.
Yeah, so I was just thinking it was rotated the other way, and then it would look even bigger if you were seeing the peak end of the house from the lake.
This side over here is what you'd actually see from the lake.
Right. So you see a story and a half on a roof.
Actually,
And the second story
actually,
is
that's
under
what,
the
this is
roof?
what you see from the lake right here.
Or is the roof basically on top of the second story?
so it's actually worse, so you're looking at a bunch of roof from the lake.
Well, depends what you-
Well, there'll be windows and that kind of thing. Not in the roof exactly, but
Yeah.
in the structure.
It'll be fine. There's trees in front of the house too.
we may, we're considering a dormer to the roof. The fine-tuned architectural details are not yet determined.
It does make a difference though if you're gonna do a very shallow roof, because then it even looks like a larger structure versus doing dormers in a roof. Makes it, mitigates it a
We're
little.
gonna try to keep the proportions as pleasing as possible. We also have the advantage, you may have noticed the number of trees on the property. If you look at proposal 2, all of these dots, well, not all of those dots, yes. Let me find the list of trees, because there's
This is a lot less visible from the lake than a lot of the other properties that we.
I might also add that it's
Overall,
very
it's
similar to
Yeah.
the home next door to it, which is also going the same direction, 2 stories, and that one has it does have a porch on it facing the lake.
And what Mark put together very gratefully was, in his spare time, a list of the trees on the property. You can see for such a small property, a great number of trees and in good health. I actually know quite a bit about trees, and the diameter on some of the trees, you can see, it's not huge, but it's substantial enough to be a mature tree. So there's a wonderful, so what you see from the lake side, and even from the Cove Road side is not gonna be a huge.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, as one board member, I do not have any more questions for the applicant.
Just gonna open it up to the public. Anybody here?
Yeah, I have a question. Mike
Just-
Hopwood. Myself and my wife Kim are the neighbors to the south. Our address is 67 Pikes Point, but we directly
Mitch,
abut
do we have a map that
this
could
property.
let us know where they are?
Yeah, I could. Actually, the other thing I had here was that.
I mean, we didn't have a context map.
I thought the wastewater map had a little bit of a
It
context.
It did have a little context over in the corner.
Yeah, I'll show it down there.
And again, I would always commend staff to give us a context map, because I think that's important.
All right, because they are, this property right over here. Actually, I'll move this out of the way here. You are this property.
That's right,
obviously.
yes.
And Southwest Shore Road comes in here, and then it breaks out into several different arms. One is the property, the road, I'm sorry,
Pikes Point.
Pikes Point, that's over here. Cove Road comes over here like this, and there are some other particular spurs as well. That's further up. But it's this whole, all these properties, not this one there, but to here, and this is the association property right here. So, what's actually upslope of the applicant's property is common land, and your property is right over here.
So the well that was talked about, providing the potable water, I haven't actually ever seen any documentation that there is rights or easement to that well. I'm not saying that it's not a possibility to share the well, but I'd like to see that. I have a concern that it's a shallow well. It already has,
Well, I guess, getting back to your original point, they already have a water supply there.
well,
That is the water supply.
they have a water supply from our well,
Oh,
but we haven't
the
seen.
well's on your property?
It is, yes.
It serves you and someone else and these people too?
It does,
Three,
so
four?
3.
Is
So-
that an existing condition as well? Is that what the situation is at this point?
Well, we were told when we bought the property that that Denise Bragg, which would be, I
It's the
guess,
next one over. It's like
to the north
the
of this
next one over.
property,
Yeah.
was they had deeded rights to the well, but not this property. Now, whether that was the seller just trying to make us feel better or not, we don't know, but I haven't seen written documentation that Mark's property does have deeded rights to our well. I'm pretty concerned that if all of a sudden there's 3 houses drawing from a shallow well, which I'm not sure is in the best of health as it is, what would happen? And I certainly wasn't told that recently that water was tested, and I was not aware that it was hooked up to Mark's property. So there's a lot of question marks over the whole potable water issue.
So going back to the applicant, what's your understanding about your right to water on this property?
We've done some research and we can share some points of interest.
What we found in the research was, and going back to your own records here in the search of the deeds of the properties, we were able to find where the Southwest Cove Road Association had come up with a plan for that, giving a 50-foot area around the well, and then indicating that there would be, they called it aqueduct, which is pipes. And there is a pipe on the 61 Cove Road, which comes from that well. Which we
Our
had-
well? Which well?
Yes.
It's actually shown on the wastewater,
Yes.
they show the water line.
It is.
Which we assume is, you know, it's been there for a long time, we certainly didn't put it there. So, and this documentation, is that said water rights reposing in and on being part only of the land and premises conveyed to or within grantor by warranty deed of the Iroquois Southwest Shore Campers Association, Inc., dated 6 of April 1961, of record volume 31, at pages 23 and 24 of the land records of said town. And that the said water rights included, including watershed area, aqueduct rights, maintenance agreement, property, water profit premier. That means sharing for expenses for maintaining, are all herein set forth.
So is that part of your deed?
This is part of a deed from 1961 to Teresa and Ernest Giro
But for that particular property, that was the
for
question.
that particular
For your
property.
61 Cove Road property.
For 61.
Right, but we-
The association is then giving
Because at
in
one
that rights
time,
to our well?
No.
the third spur road that comes off Southwest Shore Road is called Pump Road. And the reason it was called Pump Road was because there was a well down there and all the campers had rights to go and get water from that pump. And I suspect that a lot of these deeded water rights refer actually to pump, that pump, not our well. It seems illogical that the Campers Association would be just giving away rights to our well.
Okay.
I think it's.
Let me just talk off the top of my head for a second. You're asking to convert a seasonal camp into a year-round residence,
Yes, that's correct.
which would increase the water demands on whatever your water supply is.
That's correct.
The board and anybody who has interest in the water that you're drawing on has a legitimate interest in inquiring into your rights to increase that capacity.
Yes.
Someone is here raising some question, not completely illegitimately from my perspective, about your right to demand more access to that water supply. I, as a board member, just one of 7, would be reluctant to grant you approval without having more knowledge about what your legal rights are to draw on that supply. So I'm kind of wondering what your proposal is to show that you have right to do what you want to do.
What I would like to argue is that it's not a well that we have access to.
I don't think you'll persuade me, and I won't speak for anybody else, that without legal opinion, we're going to approve that, or I'm going to approve that. So I'm just wondering whether we need a little bit more investigation about what the water supply rights are here.
So when you say you're not just having access to a well, you're saying you have access to a water supply?
To a spring,
Spring, it's in the deed,
yes.
and it specifically shares that it's with the house to the north as well as ours, and the spring is located on Mr. Hawkwood's property.
But where in the deed does it say that it's located on our property?
It says watershed area dedicated, set aside, and conveyed here under is a 50-foot square area, more or less, the center of which will be a spring box permanently constructed and located 94 feet, more or less, northerly and easterly of the culvert mentioned in said deed. Said spring box being further identified by turning a 150-degree angle to the northwest from the termination of the said 94-foot line, which termination is the location of the spring box, hence proceeding 50 feet more or less to a point, from said point turning a 100-degree turn and proceeding in a
Regardless
general
of how long it
westerly
goes on,
direction.
or exactly what it says,
Yes.
I'm not sure we as a board can divine the meaning of that,
So if you could
or the
visit some of
It's
legal
also-
significance of it.
So if someone convinced himself that is that spring that is on their land, that those directions and locations is that spring?
I don't think there's another spring in the area.
Actually-
That the pipe to our camp is hooked to.
This is specifically from the D1.
The pipe from our camp is hooked to this spring.
Right.
If I may?
So what did the permit that you got, what did it,
Yeah, that's what I was
what
saying.
was, what did that say? It was just, there's plenty of water, or just
It's
good
to-
water, or?
It was in good water, good spring water, and that it needs to be redirected so that we comply with the septic system design. So that the water is, the line will be away from the septic system.
Just move the pipe is what, that requirement.
Yes,
Yes.
it's remove the
Right.
pipe.
But the-
But and you're talking about moving the pipe that crosses their property?
No, on our property, where
Well, it
when the
must.
septic.
Well, it's showing it on their property as
Actually, a
well.
portion of it is on their property. But, Mark, if you can comment, because Justin Wells did this design, got the approval, and I'm sure he did a thorough job looking into these type of things. Would you, did he talk to you about that at all, or any of that?
Yeah, I think what I might be able to add is that the water is excellent water in terms of meeting requirements for potability. The volume is an issue, and I'm not sure where that's addressed. I mean, in issuing the permit, I'm not even sure how they discerned, whether the volume is adequate or not. I think that's something that comes up. I don't know exactly where that comes up, to be honest with you. I think the legality, if the board is interested in just the whole legal issues around what's really deeded and all, that's a valid point. What we have heard from our attorneys is that because 3 different properties have deeded rights to a source, because one property didn't actually utilize it for a number, actually really utilize it up to this point, does not mean that they have any less right to the water. So should there be a deficiency in volume of water for the 3 properties, that would be shouldered by all 3 properties, because they were all equally deeded to the source. But you probably need a legal opinion on that, I take
Well,
it.
that's not a satisfying explanation to me either, when one party is proposing to expand the use of the property. So I think we need clarification as to who has rights to how much water in this property. And I think in the first instance, that's on the, okay, it's business.
I don't know if we would ever-
In the first instance, this is a issue for the applicant.
The only problem is I see is I have a feeling you're not gonna find in the deed that it's gonna tell you how much each person can have for water. It's probably split between the 3,
I'm in a meeting.
even them out.
Okay, give me a minute.
Yeah, I just gotta get it.
Right?
I don't understand how the association can give rights to other.
I mean, and we're also talking about something that was written a long time ago, when these were, summer camps at best. So I'm with Greg, I'm concerned.
Jed, Dennis, I'm sorry, I got business for a few minutes, so I'll be out of this.
Okay.
So what the action is, I don't know, but it seems like somebody needs to definitively determine what's available, because I'm also with Greg that if it was just an ongoing situation, that's, I guess, one thing, but if you're talking about actually increasing use, especially giving a shallow well, as it's described here, I guess I'm not so inclined to just automatically, give it a stamp of approval without having some understanding of what's actually legally implied by the use of that well.
Was your house a camp at one time?
No.
It was always a full-time residence?
Well, the other thing that's,
And the other house past them
The house to the north is, I believe, a full-time residence.
always was?
I'll defer to.
I think that was also a conversion, I'm not certain,
Denise's.
yeah.
I'm also a little worried about that, because she's also selling, so we haven't seen the impact of full use out of that house, that 2 or 3 bedroom house, you know what I mean? It's,
Are there separate pumps on these?
They're all they all draw, so yes, they all have their own, means of drawing from the.
And how are they powered? Where's
Well,
the power
I've
coming
never
from?
But
seen
if you share a line, you must share a
It's
pump
sunk.
with Denise.
No, we have, so, in this deed description, I know we've never looked in your system, but in that description, your line comes in a foot, at least a foot lower than
Right.
the one that goes to mine and to Denise.
Right, but if you've got a single line, you must have a single pump.
No, we don't, well, we have check valves and we each just draw.
What does this say here?
Oh,
So what do you think we
really?
should do, have them?
Actually, wait a second.
Dennis, if you're to build a brand new house, you have to have a known source of water, correct? It has to be you gotta prove it out that you have water, right?
Yeah.
I think we have to do that here. I think somewhere, someone has to come up and say that this deed is current to the water source. Otherwise, I don't think you can go forward.
Because we have proof of water, but we're not sure if
You have
it's-
proof of water and proof that it's good, but who owns the rights? Is that clear? I'm not sure that it is.
And I'm not saying that we would do this, but their rights to that water are based on it being a seasonal camp, not a full-time home.
We don't know that, though. We
But,
don't know if that's
but
in the
the,
deed that says that.
but
It
the,
just says it has rights.
right, but they didn't give them rights saying, hey, you got a camp here now, but we're planning on this becoming a full-time home, so you got rights for whatever volume of water you want. I mean, the rights were given based on it being a seasonal home. They couldn't possibly have foreseen that it was gonna become a year-round residence.
The other
Who
day-
knows, I mean, it could have been a summer home that had all kinds of people there all summer. I mean, I think we're definitely gonna have to have, a lawyer needs to look at it and just see what,
those
And what
rights
would
are.
I don't have an answer.
And what would be the potential to, if you can re-drill another well on the?
Well, if they have rights to it, I don't think there's anything we can do about it. I mean, if they have the rights, they have the rights.
It's specifically in our deed as well as in.
Right, but if you, I mean, just looking ahead,
Yes.
if you drawing on the well makes the well go dry for 4 houses, is there even a possibility for all of you to get together and draw and build,
That's-
and drill a new well? I
that
mean,
would-
does the
No,
property have that?
Not
capacity?
not if it's a spring. I mean, basically, you've got a gravel pond in the ground that is getting filled up with clean groundwater, and no amount of digging is gonna mean there's more water bubbling up out of the ground.
Right.
So, I mean, if it goes dry, it's gonna mean that we're putting in a $15,000 well, because
With enough-
they
With
use,
enough volume to support
yeah.
4 houses.
Well, it's three.
Three,
But, but you're right, it would, if it were to go dry, there'd have to be a solution. I'm not sure it would be shared by one individual from what I understand.
No,
But- But there would have to be some, what, I don't know whether, I'm kind of looking ahead. If there's either a deed problem or a water volume issue, my understanding is that the applicants have learned that an alternative, I don't really want to speak for you though, but do you have an alternative water
Yes.
source?
Yes, the state approved, we can take water from the lake and have a engineered water system. So that's our alternative. Our intention would obviously, on the other end, would be if there was a need for a well, we as neighbors, and I would hope whoever purchases the next property would share the cost, much like it's said in the historic records, that it's a shared cost.
But where would the well go?
It would, well, we would perhaps ask you or the neighbor next door in the blue home, well, Denise Bragg's property, and that we would jointly work together on that. But we do have that option of pumping from the lake, and it's been done, and I've talked to several other neighbors, and that's certainly, we would want to do what's best.
So you have a permit to do that?
We would apply, we would get an engineered design water system where we could pump from the lake for gray water, or would maybe continue to use the spring, share the spring.
So even if you use lake water, though, it appears that based on the layout, the water line would still have to be moved.
Yes, we want to do that because of the way that the septic design was for the sand area of the septic design. The water has to be rerouted around.
And looking at the plan, I mean, part of the concern I have with that is looking with that, at the plan, it's showing a section of the water line on the Hopwood property that would have to be dug up and moved. And it would also potentially, while you're working on it, the house on the other end of the line would be without water. So it seems like there's a lot of thought that has to go into moving or doing anything with this water line, whether or not you decide to tap into it, or can tap into it. I don't know.
That's a real good observation. What does this board need to know with regards to that? I mean, there are definitely hurdles and challenges to implement really any system. And that'd have to be worked out with the neighbors in terms of the impact on them with, disservice and what all. Does this board need to have that all spelled out?
Well, I'm guessing if it's in the deed that they can use the water, that they also are allowed to do any repairs or...
That's also, that was the next paragraph in this particular piece I was reading. Conveyed here under as a right of way for aqueduct purposes, including but not restricted to the right to excavate for renovation or repair, provided the property is replaced in as good condition as before, by use for whatever manual or mechanical means as may be convenient.
Because of the I don't think I would be comfortable agreeing to a somewhat vague description of a vague legal description from many years ago and applying that to the decision now.
Well, we can ask for a legal opinion, but usually those rights that were established back then, that's what he'd be investigating. That's what he or she would be investigating is, okay, so tell us what you found, what all this means as to the rights of the existing water supply, especially for year-round and expanded use, right?
Right, if a legal professional provides us with an opinion on it.
Yeah.
And your property deed has no description of a shared well.
No, not with, do you remember
Well, I
exactly
just
what?
remember when we bought, we had a registered letter with Mark on, we know you're tapped in and it's, remember?
Yeah,
Something like it's fine for now.
Yeah.
Can be
So do you think
discontinued
this is
at
something you
use,
could get in
whatever.
3 weeks, or 3 weeks or 5 weeks, right?
Yes.
Do you have places on your property that you can drill wells that are out of, that are, you know, out of?
Well, I think
what's
if
the
they
shed,
have
like-
deeded rights, they get to, I mean, it's their right, you know what I mean?
No, I know, I was
I think
just,
she means on ours, if we had to redo, is that what you mean?
yeah, other places that you,
I mean, that's not something we've looked into because it hasn't been a concern up until now.
I'm just wondering if that question needs to be answered in light that they have an alternative water source, and that is a system that purifies it from the lake. I mean, it's a good question, can we put a well in, but that would sort of be maybe the third option.
I don't think it's up to us to decide what the source is. I think they just gotta prove they have one.
Well, I would at this point feel comfortable understanding when I called the state that we could have an engineered system for a new home that can pump from the lake. So with that said, that's an alternative for us. My understanding also is that on all 3 deeds, because we were doing some research, issues on the deed specifically to water rights, my understanding is each deed specifically says that we can share. We share the rights.
So I guess what we're looking for is just a legal opinion that what your reading is what actually is what's.
What an attorney would read.
Yeah.
Mhm. Applicant provide a legal opinion as to the rights to the existing water supply for year-round use by an expanded dwelling, and rights to move the water line on the neighboring property for septic isolation.
Yes.
So, to just understand that, there's really just 2 issues then. The deed, what is really deeded? And then secondly, you know, how would movement of the line on our neighbor's property be dealt?
And it sounds to me like you can locate that well by the description there and say, yep, that's the well they were talking about right there. And that's, because obviously we can't figure that out. And so.
is it
Then you can
okay
decide
that-
to go that route or go the other route of engineering it out of the lake or.
Right.
And Ted, you don't think anyone needs to weigh into the fact that if they legally, that they can tap into the line, but if that line makes the well run dry, that's just,
Well, I think the lawyer's gonna find in the deed whether, if they all 3 have rights, they all 3 are responsible if
if it
fails.
goes dry, okay.
Right, and that was specific in that, the one
So
that
that's
Carol
like
referred
saying
to.
The
that talked about
source
shared
is also the responsibility of all 3, right?
Is it
Is
my
that what-
understanding that
How we're reading that?
the board wants, that would be a third item in this opinion that you'd like
Yeah.
to see?
Yeah.
How would the increased volume be?
Well,
handled?
or not, I mean,
Yeah, what is, to me, is like, as best they can, I mean, what was implied by shared well use? Does that mean you could put into something, you could put in a brewery there that's going to take 4,000 gallons of water a day?
Exactly.
And everybody else just has to suck it up and you know, find the well that allows you to do that?
Suck it up.
Yeah,
Suck
I
it
know.
up. Because to me, that makes no sense.
But sometimes water rights do funny things like that. You know, that when they're not specific, and everyone has access, it's a common thing, you know, everybody can use as much as they want, up until it doesn't work anymore, yeah.
And I also know all of the stuff in this area has been very loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
As far as, you know, real strong legal, opinions or rights or whatever, and things change over time. So, it would help me if the lawyer could also somehow weigh in on what his opinion is, his or her opinion is on,
Well, it's like
what
we're-
was implied by these various deeds, I guess.
Very good, so 3 items, the actual deed, what is the deed referring to? What is the source that's being referred to? The volume issue, and then the movement of the line, the water line on the Hopwood property. And just to make sure those are the 3 things, whatever occurs, I think the applicants are gonna want Mike and Kim, their neighbors, to be, I don't know if I should say comfortable, at least maybe not raise another issue next time. I mean, I know we can't stop that, but I just throw it out. Is there anything else you can think of, Mike and Kim, that you would like addressed?
Not really. I mean, we're not necessarily opposed to this in any way, shape, or form. It's just obviously messing with our well is a big concern, and it could end up being a pretty sizable expense
Okay.
for us.
So is that something you think you could do in 3 weeks or 5 weeks, or should we go to do we have too much going on at the next?
Well, I mentioned as far as it's the rec department, which hopefully, as you said, hopefully would be, we have a hearing that expansion of a non-conforming structure, but there's not going to be any of these other types of issues. We have the continuation of Willett and Campbell, and that's.
Are you guys
I
under
say
some
5 weeks.
timeline or with construction or
You're gonna be talking to a lawyer, right, too?
Oh, yeah, right.
We would like to go out 5 weeks if there's not a huge rush on this, but if there is, I think we can sneak it into the 3rd week.
It's up to you.
And you will give us clarification and explicit questions to be answered.
I think Mark just said the questions very specifically.
I think that if there was any other big things that we had concerns with the project, it would have come up tonight, right?
Okay.
Do you guys think that? Am I just speaking for myself?
No, I think what I'm saying is, I was trying to pay attention to everything that was being said and did not write down in full the questions. So I need to make sure that I am writing down the specific items that you
To
are
speak with the
interested in.
lawyer about.
Can you give that to?
So we should probably put it in the minutes, right?
Right.
Yes,
So
please.
we'll put that in the minutes and get them to you.
Okay, and your minutes are, turnaround is,
The next 2 weeks, actually, so we'll have to get it to you before,
Well,
before you look at the minutes.
I get them, yeah. You said Friday or something, yeah, so we should get draft minutes, and we should have enough to be able to provide you with that specifics, but I thought we pretty much said it. It's the deeds, understanding the information on the deeds. Let's see, it was the volume and movement, right?
I
Go ahead,
think
go
what I'd
ahead.
like to get is a source identification from the deeds. That is, does that spring location refer to the one that's actually, what we're talking about? Legal opinion as to the rights to the existing water supply for year-round use by an expanded dwelling. Rights to move the water line on neighboring property for septic isolation. And if improvements are required, to whom does it fall to make improvements?
And that would, question, that would cover if it runs dry, whose responsibility is it? Is it the source owner
Right.
or the shared?
And if you want this even sooner than that, we're on camera right now.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm not gonna speak for the VCAM people, but, usually, they say a day, but usually within 2 days, they have this on the VCAM website, and that's accessible through the town website. And if you want, I'll send you the link to that.
thank you. That would be very helpful.
So you think you can
As
have
well
this
as-
all in 3 weeks? Or, is there a time crunch on this? we'd like to move.
Definitely a tight time crunch.
If you don't have it in 3 weeks, you can always come in and ask it to be moved, or just,
All right.
just send an email to Mitch to say, we need 2 more weeks, and we can move it.
So I'll make a motion to continue this till November
Seventh.
7th.
Mm-hmm.
I'll second.
All those in,
For the minutes.
any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Sorry it took so long.
No one
Wasn't me,
expected
though.
this long.
Just for the record.
Thank you for your patience.
A lot of applications.
I figured a couple of them would blow right through.
And I'll send-
Me
I'll
too.
send Carol.
You wanna continue this till November 7th? All right.
Is this a continued or is this
Up
a
next
new
is
application?
Vermont Well and Pump Site Plan Review.
I don't think I was
How you doing?
the first one.
There's a couple.
I think
Do
it's
I
a
put up
new,
the
it's an
plan set?
update to
Yeah.
the previous, but it's
Couple. I'm gonna zoom in here a
Okay.
little bit.
How you doing?
Good evening, I'm Chuck LaRose, I work for Civil Engineering Associates.
Okay.
I'm the engineer for the project.
Okay.
We're here with the owners tonight. So this project is located, as Mitch is getting this set up on the corner of Route 116 and Old Hollow Road.
Mhm.
It's right next to Clifford Lumber and across the street from the general store. What you see here and what you have in front of you, C 1.0 is existing condition survey that was done June 2017. You guys have seen this site before in 2016. But this is updated site plan, what has been done to date. And generally, there's a parking area in front and storage area on the north side of the property. So, under proposed conditions, one of the
I'll zoom in a little bit on this.
Great, thank you. One of the more significant changes is proposal of a garage, a 3,000 square foot garage, used mainly to store equipment for the well company. We're gonna maintain customer parking out front. There'll be 4 spaces, handicap accessible. And then on the remainder of the site will be storage for equipment. They have a number of large vehicles that will be stored inside the garage, perimeter employee parking up here. There are a few Connex containers that we've allocated space for.
You might as well show them that it's here and over here.
The site does break the 10,000 square foot threshold for impervious area. So we have designed a wastewater treatment system.
Stormwater.
Stormwater treatment system for the site in compliance with the 2017 Vermont stormwater rules. The good soils are very good. Groundwater table is low, so we'll be infiltrating to meet compliance.
Where are you infiltrating? What's your? Oh, that's it in the corner there?
So we're basically maintaining the existing drainage pattern of the site today. The water essentially sheet flows across and makes its way down to the corner. So we're redirecting it a little bit, provide some more time for infiltration and pre-treatment. Generally, how stormwater will be dealt with on the site.
So that's excavated, you're actually excavating that?
Yes, it'll be a infiltration basin is what they're called, grass. And what you see here is just the earthwork contours to help someone to build it. Okay. Is there any questions on the site plan that I can address while we're here?
I guess there was a couple questions about landscaping and you provided, did we get another?
So, yes, I
You
mentioned.
sent me something today.
Yeah,
I
so,
was able to.
so please take your time and review that, their landscaping costs,
I have-
and general site costs.
Didn't have a chance to review these,
I would,
these are the files.
yeah, I would
pull up the site improvement estimate. Because I've listed out what the building is gonna generally cost around $102,000. And then we're having a hard time getting the minimum, like, having the minimum landscaping be satisfied, because it's such a small site that the landscaping that we're getting, not really reaching those $4,000 marks. It's more, if you go back, I've got a couple estimates from gardeners and Champlain Valley Cedars that,
So you want to
yeah,
see that
I mean, that's 836, that's for 28 cedars, and then add like maybe $100 to that for the shrubs. Because on the site plan, we're proposing 28 cedars, and
Those are installed, that's
yeah,
installed
that's
pricing?
installed pricing.
Yeah, so for landscaping, we're showing on this west side, a number of bushes and a number of white cedars, 4 feet tall.
Guys,
So
you guys haven't gone
those-
home, huh?
So those landscaping that we're showing was actually recommended by the DRB in 2016. Now, we were showing those, like I said, because it was recommended. We have further recommendations, you know, we're perhaps open to that.
Dennis, I'm actually recusing myself from this, so.
So further on the north side of the property, there's 21 cedars listed, by screening from the neighboring property, and it is a contractor's yard, and they're required to have perimeter screening according to regulations.
And there's screening behind the barn, right? There's woods there?
Yeah, so this is all woods today, and looking to maintain.
But it appears it's all on the neighbor's property. It's not, none of that woods is on your property or this property.
Most of it is on the neighbor's property.
What sort of size caliper cedars are you talking about?
Installed 4 feet, and then they'll hopefully.
You don't need any setbacks for storm water from the property line?
For treatment,
Yeah. No.
like I said, it's gonna be a grassed infiltration area, so water has time to come in, sit, and will usually infiltrate into the ground.
The only thing that I see as a problem is you don't have any room for screening on your side of the property. So that, I mean, you can't really expect that the neighboring property bear the,
Are you talking on the east side or
no,
on the south?
must be the south.
So maybe Mitch, if you could scroll down a little bit, probably a good opportunity to
It's
talk
a
about
funny piece of
this.
land, isn't it? Yeah.
This, so what our survey department has done is drawn the property according to the deed.
Okay.
And strangely enough, that actually leaves this segment of land.
Funny stretch that no one-
That we have marked it as undetermined. So it actually may be the town that owns that. We're not
Okay.
really certain at this point without further research. We thought it was in everyone's best interest to contain our development on our own site, so we've done our best to do that. Now, it's not to say we couldn't add some screening trees if the board would, would like to see that on the banks of the infiltration area.
I don't need to see it today, but just the possibility, if you ever have to do it in the future, I was worried that if you went right up to the line, that it doesn't leave you any room to do it. But you think that there's a way that you could do it on the banks of the,
I don't think that's unreasonable.
So are you actually cutting some vegetation in that infiltration area? You're actually cutting some trees down in that?
It's mostly brush, about
Okay.
4 feet high.
Is the building right on the setback?
Yes, there's a 10-foot building setback to the rear property line. That is where the building is shown right now.
And is there tree removal to put the building there?
I actually don't believe so. There is
fairly
But-
long.
But no screening on basically the building's 10 feet off the property line.
Yes, as the building's 10 feet off the property line. We've done our best to demonstrate that the woods will be maintained 5 feet from the property line. And by maintain, let it grow up, let it naturally screen the rear of the property.
Keeping the screening method in place, assuming that the neighbor will,
Assuming the neighbor does cut up to 5 feet to the property, up to his property line, I suppose.
Is screening required between two industrial parcels?
That was the next question, is what's
Yeah, what is back
what is
there?
that? What is to the east of you there?
It's all industrial.
Actually, that currently there is currently a residence.
Yeah,
on
but
that
it's
particular-
in the industrial zone.
Yes,
it's currently a residence.
but currently it's a residence.
Well, that existing building's not is that existing building, there's not a residence, is it? Next
To the
property?
east?
You turn that off?
Yeah, that's where,
Oh, that is the residence?
Well,
We-
no, this is the former residence that was on.
On the property to the, sorry.
Right over here?
Leon Bradley lives there.
Yes, Leon Bradley's house is like
Probably to the north, I'm sorry.
No,
Probably
you're
to the
right,
east.
it's to the east, it's the east.
east,
Oh.
yes. This is to
But
the
there's
east.
there's also property to the north.
That's Clifford Lumber.
That's Clifford's, yeah.
Yeah.
That happens to be Lumber Yard, yeah. But this property over here is currently a residence,
Yep.
pre-existing non-conforming, but still a residence.
So the stormwater ponds there are supposed to be able to handle all of the runoff from the property?
The stormwater pond is designed in accordance with the 2017 Vermont Stormwater Manual. We are treating 100% of the water quality volume, and as outlined in your development regulations, we're able to utilize waivers such as you would on the state application to meet channel protection, 10-year storm and 100-year storm.
Usually use the infiltration for channel protection, I believe. But yes,
Channel protection is used to be the 1-inch storm.
yeah.
So either way, we have a stormwater sign off, I guess is the best way to say it, that's been included. Outlines the extent of the treatment and how it meets those rules.
So it's all just grading, it's getting the water down there? Because I mean, so like, what's shedding off the building to the north?
Sure, it's actually quite a flat site. These are 1-foot contours, I believe, and
Yeah, so what happens to the rainwater coming off the 1,500 square feet to the north?
perhaps, are you talking about this area, or
Yeah.
where?
So you got a pretty big building there, and
Sure.
so, and the gable end's facing 116, so you've got 1,500 square feet of roof facing north, what happens?
So we've done our best to show that the stormwater will be graded to drain out of here and generally across the parking lot.
And the drainage from the house and the upfront parking is all just going to sheet flow across the parking lot into the... I mean, what I'm not seeing is any sort of storm drains anywhere.
No, there is no storm drains. What we've done here is do our best to not collect the water. So what that means is we're not concentrating all the storm water in one area, in one drain, in one swale. We're spreading it out so it has time to infiltrate over the good soils across the site and make its way into the treatment facility.
That whole site's all gravel, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like what soils, but.
It's great soils.
Yeah.
As far as, so I can't really tell because I pulled up like a Google map, but it looks kind of like they're trees, but there might be bushes over where you're gonna put the pond, and then it kind of looks like there's nothing towards the end of the road. So it looks like the only current, like there isn't any vegetation if you go up, but it might be an old map.
You said that in this area here?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then there doesn't look like there's anything between between where that is and then the road. But that might be because this is old.
Yeah, like I said, when I was out there in August, it's definitely growing up as far as.
But then
underbrush,
but then on your map, you kind of show like there's vegetation between the storm water treatment and the road. So scroll down.
We talking.
Which
Yeah,
road?
right there, that
So
road.
So this is not part of the applicant's property at
Right.
this point?
But you were kind of using it as part of your screening around your,
It's definitely a benefit for the property.
right, except I
this-
don't, currently I don't see that there is any vegetation there. But it might be because this isn't accurate.
Yeah, absolutely, I think it'd be, it's definitely a good idea to always get out to the site, have it set out that way. There is definitely wooded vegetation between Hollow Road and
Okay.
that's
If
my
there-
observation.
If there isn't, I would say we should ask for something. But if there is, that's great. It just doesn't look like, it looks like the only wooded vegetation would be where the storm water's going to go.
William Mustage, I've lived in that area over 40 years. That vegetation that you're talking about, which is on the south boundary of your property, and between that and the Hollow Road, is at least 15 to 18 feet wide, and it's been there as long as I've been in town.
Okay, so it's there. It just didn't look like it on this map. You can't
The
really
other
see
problem
it.
is, I think we're batting the head against the wall when we worry about what's running off of here, when you've got the people to the north that have no collection of whatsoever for any of their groundwater. And they're in an elevated area where it's gonna come down and all run into this spot, and we're gonna have to worry about how to take care of it.
The trouble is, it's a new rule, so we can only go from projects from here on
I
out.
understand that, I can understand.
So what was the other thing, lighting? You have,
Yeah, so Mitch could probably have to go to the lighting plan up here.
Well,
If you would like. So right now, the intent is to have security lighting and perimeter lighting around the site.
Mhm.
As the owners have found that makes better protection for their equipment and any other materials that are stored outside. We've definitely, we're definitely here to hear your thoughts.
well, you're gonna replace the lights on the house, the existing house, right? I
So
think that's what
the
it
house,
said.
the lights on the house are to be removed. I believe it was shown on the other plan. The only light that will be on the house will be over the entrance.
Uh-huh.
So if there's anybody coming in late, as we know,
Okay.
it's dark in the morning now, so coming in early, so.
So I'm seeing two lights that I don't really understand the purpose of. In the lower right corner, yep, and then one over by what was marked kind of as garden. They seem to be lighting what's going to be a grassy area. It's not a parking lot, it's not going to be accessed by employees. I mean, it's around behind the building. Why is the need to have lights
Looks like there's something
back
there.
there? I thought that was basically where the stormwater drains were going to go.
Can I address that?
More for security than anything, because we had issues in that area.
But you got lights on the building, you got lights around the parking lot area.
But I thought the lights on the building couldn't cast out, they could only cast down. Wasn't that a requirement of the lights? So for me to light that area, the lights have to be in that area.
I definitely need lights. I've been 40 years in the security business. I'm a registered locksmith in the state of Vermont. And the easiest way to break into a place is to go through where there's a lot of bushes where people can't see it. And we're talking about the bushes on the south side between the Hollow Road and the building. And definitely if I was gonna break in, that's where I'd go. If there was no light there, I'd have a clear entrance right into that building. The lights are gonna deter me from going.
You're not gonna break in on us, are you?
I got my pick set in my pocket.
He doesn't have to get keys, he's a locksmith.
That's right. We know that.
Lock in.
And then you had a request for 24-hour service. That's just if someone calls for an emergency, you go in there and grab the truck and head out.
For example, after business hours today, we had a customer who they had no water. They had a 2-year-old that needed a bath. And that's why he was late. He was in
That'd be the
Richmond.
extent of it, it's just to go in and get your.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all the snow's gonna be plowed to the south, is that the plan?
There's actually 3 snow storage areas. I think one gets lost a little bit in the northwest corner, but we'll start up there. So there is a snow storage area shown on the plan, kind of in this corner. And there's another one if we move to the south on the corner of the customer parking. And then around the back, there's a significantly larger snow storage area for basically clear the main storage yard.
Is the existing house, is that an office or is it it's an office now?
It's an office now, yeah.
So the cedars along 116, I know you said it already, but that, what you have proposed right there are those cedars?
Those are cedars.
It says 3 lilacs.
And
Are
they-
those existing?
Yes.
The lilacs down here, correct?
No,
So-
the lilacs are on the north side.
So as part of the previous ERB meeting, I should say, in 2016, is that these lilacs be relocated. And perhaps that's what these are, but these aren't in very good shape. We can use new lilacs. Like I said, the spacing and the numbers what was recommended, but we're back here in front of you, so definitely.
So you're a little bit under budget now, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And I feel like it's because of how small the site is, and it's just.
Well, I'm just wondering if you could just tighten it up a little bit, maybe, along 116?
Put more in.
Because you're gonna park the drill truck. I mean, you're never gonna totally not see the drill truck, but that's where you're gonna park it, right?
Yeah, there's one drill rig, so part of our discussion with staff was that we should have parking locations for every vehicle that may be on the site at any time. And I think the reality is that may not always be the case, so.
But you
in
gotta
the-
plan for the worst
Sure,
case
exactly,
scenario.
so worst case scenario, there may be a drill rig parked up here, so if we add some more cedars there, maybe that's a good way to get a little closer to our.
Infill that, just to make it a little more.
We're also really planning to park as vehicles in the building.
Right.
That's our primary goal.
Okay.
A
Get
lot
them
of
in, out
times.
of cover, out of the weather.
Especially with 2 drill rigs, one rig is usually always on, like going from well site to well site to well site. So it's rare that there's even 2 parked there at the same time. It's actually kind of magnificent to see them all parked next to each other.
We're gonna get money
What
for the
Keisha
parking
and
lot.
Jacques did a very good job of is actually explaining where all of explaining which trucks you actually have and where they're gonna park and make it make sense in a plan like this, which makes it a good, complete application for the board to take a look at. So you've got one drill rig here, another drill rig over here, and then you've got your pump, water
Okay.
tank, and van potentially over here. And you mentioned the 2 other pickups, which I believe that you use for yourself and business, and the trail that you show over here. Throw in your employees, you've covered, and the public, which can come over here, you've covered that. And that was what was important in your use.
So I think part of, when we talked about it before, there was no building.
Yeah.
And so, there was very little landscape budget, so we're like, okay, we don't wanna go nuts
Right.
on landscape. But, now that you've got, because of the building, you've got a bigger
Right.
budget to spend, because of regulations. So, along with maybe some more cedars, potentially, a couple more bushes there in front of the parking for the customer parking. And my other thought would be if you did a slightly larger caliber cedar. I don't know if that would eat the rest of the budget up, just so that they're a little bigger from the get-go.
Yeah.
Instead of taking a couple years to grow up. So those would be, I mean, finding more places to stick more bushes doesn't seem to, make a lot of sense, but, maybe starting with some bigger bushes or a little more along the front
Well, it
edge.
does along 116.
Yeah, I'm just saying, find some place to put a, little garden or something like that, just to spend the money doesn't make a lot of sense, but.
And we can find that that the landscaping is adequate without spending all the money.
You don't have to spend it all.
That's what we're hoping.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Because of existing vegetation and such, right?
So what is the goal for along 116? Is it to completely block the sight of any vehicle?
No,
Which
Or
we
is
really-
it
just to break it up.
Which, we want to avoid not for the cost of the plants, but to keep some exposure.
Yeah, you just wanna just break it up.
Yeah.
That's my,
Are you guys gonna keep the fence?
because there's no way of,
The fence still there, it came.
There is
It
a
is still
picture
there.
of
That's
the-
a, that's a good question. I don't,
It's shown on the proposed plan, so.
There's
we would have no
also-
reason
Sounds
to
like
take
yes.
it down.
There's also a proposed sign that'll be up there as well. There's actually, in one of the things that I sent today, there's a
I saw a sign.
drawing of the sign. Or a workup of it.
6 foot by 2.5 foot freestanding sign.
Yeah.
Letters are less than 20 inches or whatever, what's our rule?
They have to be,
No, that's
they wouldn't have to be.
And is it lit?
Well, right now it's not lit.
So is it an issue for the light, for the,
If you wanted to light it, you'd have to, it's additional approval, I think, for a lighted sign.
so we could start with a sign and then seek
Light it
approval to-
later if you'd like.
So
That's an
the
easy
fence
one.
is actually a good security feature too.
Yeah,
So
no, I think it can be nice, but I
Yeah.
think, the plants along it would be nice.
And the plants are in front of the fence or?
You said those
behind
are
the
not
fence?
in good
They're-
repair?
Well, those are actually on the other side right
Yeah.
now. Those are lilac bushes that we could actually maybe even keep there and then plant cedars among them.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
think,
we were thinking
But then on
that they would be on the road side of
Right.
the fence.
Well, we just wanted to be able to respect
So those
the
would be added. We'd have to add
states
those.
right away.
Yeah.
We have a letter of intent for the improvements to the driveway, but not to do any landscaping inside there right away, so.
Do they usually not allow that?
They,
I wouldn't recommend it without approval.
they've come across, and knocked on the door and asked for, there have been, I think Brown's had a sign out there that they asked to get moved. And on the other side, the for sale sign had to be not in the way, so they definitely are looking.
I mean, the cedars are definitely gonna grow above the fence anyway, so.
But, I mean, I wouldn't, we originally said like small bushes would be fine, so I wouldn't necessarily think those would be visible.
And I can also just talk to the transportation agency and just see what they would.
Just in this whole discussion with landscaping on that corner from 116 to Hollow Road, just keep in mind visibility. So don't,
yeah, and we
make
don't
sure
really
that's.
control that section.
Right, but
where-
don't make it worse.
Right.
John, you may have quite a bit different
I agree.
distance before you actually get
Yeah,
that.
I just
into a
wanna,
visibility
yeah.
issue.
I'm really directing staff to draft provisions.
Yeah.
Or if there's any more comments from the public.
I don't think there's any public.
Or they were,
Actually, if
I'd just
I
like
can
to
just
see a
ask one,
speedy resolution to the complete process and everybody be happy.
just as far as timing, just to make sure that there are certain dates, when do you think that you would be able to have the site complete, as far as the landscaping?
As far as the landscaping?
Champlain Valley Cedars, I need to get back to them ASAP if we're gonna put anything in this.
Yeah, this
This
year seems to be
we
a
we
little
would we would more
stretched.
likely give you till end of planting season next
Next
spring,
year.
which would be June or
That- yeah,
July or
that would-
something like that.
So if I put in a draft decision, say June 30th, to have all of the plantings in and functioning, is that something that,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we'll get some conditions on, either changing caliper or adding additional plantings along the fence to the north and to the south.
right, because I think you'd be looking at, I'm gonna say, because from what Jacques, what you said was the existing trees that are in this stretch over here are basically coming out, most likely, not in good shape.
So there's just a few lilac bushes, so they're not even
In
trees.
So, in essence, do you think you could hypothetically, do you think that hypothetically this could be doubled?
As far as the minimum height or right now we're calling it minimum height, or you think you double the caliper or?
Or, actually, originally I was thinking double the trees, but, you
Is
know.
9-foot spacing for a cedar, I think this is gonna be a high cedar hedge when it's done, a high cedar row when it's done. Is 9-foot spacing the right spacing to develop a kind of fairly continuous,
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd just like to point out that was what was recommended, so that's, we're absolutely open to adding
I
more or
sent
larger.
this plan
oh,
to,
so they just scaled off this plan, so here's what I think you're asking for, right?
I think
sorry,
for-
say that one more time.
They just looked at the plan and said, you're asking for this many, this is what.
Yeah, I mean, I said
Yeah.
that this, and so they've got whatever the spacing is proposed, and so they.
You know, double might not be right. What if we said, yes, you got one up there with 7, but if you look at the 6 that's there, if we made that 9, and with a combination of maybe 10,
What
with the
if,
7th one over there?
what if we did 5 foot instead of 4 foot?
That's
So what
another
about back
possibility.
to the issue though of trying to keep some spacing in there that you refer to, Dennis? I mean, you know,
Maybe
that's
those
certainly a
things.
concern for us and
Sort of
I
increasing.
mean, my only suggestion was maybe put, those trees along 116 aren't cedars, right? Aren't they lilac?
Right,
Or
these
Those
they're
are
white
lilacs.
cedars?
They're changing them to white cedar, yeah.
so are we saying we're taking the lilacs out?
I think you said that.
I think that's, yeah, I think that, actually perhaps relocate them, they're in healthy condition.
We can do that, right?
I know.
They'll grow anywhere.
How much is it?
They're actually
How far
beautiful.
apart are those cedars? 7 feet?
No, the length of above are 9 feet, I think, what I read.
4
Four?
4 foot?
Oh,
No, how far apart are they
Apart.
along 116?
Along.
We know that distance and we know how many trees there are.
And so I know they're staggered, this is about 10 feet, and they're, once again, they're just staggered, so they're probably 12 feet, that would be my guess.
Apart.
12 to 15 feet, yeah.
Okay, those-
Just from eyeballing it from the plan here.
I'm not quite sure what we're trying to do, but you can put some deciduous trees along the road and kind of,
Break it up.
yeah.
I like that
And
idea.
that placed here, so they start to mass
Yeah,
eventually, but they also give visibility through them.
I think that's a great idea.
Cause you
And,
kind of,
and in terms of aesthetics,
Yep,
I think it's gonna help
Or,
our area.
better than a cedar grove.
Yeah.
So, how many would you want to see in there?
3 or 4 along there.
All right.
Oh, well, you gotta be careful, how long is that? You can put those too close together.
Yeah,
So,
so we would probably do
Probably
maples.
Probably 4
Yeah.
would be the too many.
yeah, I think
So
you're right.
3?
Probably.
Yeah. I think you're right.
All right. And what about the area down by the public parking and handicap spot?
Where the fence is.
Well, we aren't parking big vehicles and trucks there, that's,
Yeah.
a car parking lot, I think. Having something like those lilacs and, other flowering bushes.
Something 3 or 4 feet, and maybe that's the
Yeah.
highest it ever gets.
Oh, they're a great idea. Yeah, they get much taller than that if you don't trim them, I found.
Ours went crazy and then they look pretty bad.
Right, so the number of lilacs that they have there is sufficient for you.
Yeah,
And,
The amount of time that there's actually customers at
Yeah,
our
yeah, I understand.
location
yeah,
is
you have
Very
sufficient
small.
parking, you have, that's
The employees will appreciate the,
I'm sure they will.
Yes, I will.
So what about the idea of uniformity with maples straight down? You know, I worry about the lilacs and stuff because the parking lot looks big, but it's really not as big as you think. What about the idea of you know, say maples straight down through?
I guess I don't have a problem with that either.
I'm just worried that, you know, as I said, it looks big, but.
Well, no, I mean, if you wanted to put a maple between, two maples, let's say,
Yep.
between each of those bushes.
I think I just drove my budget up.
I think that'd be.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good idea. Well, we're trying to get, we're trying to.
But and you get a street tree line, right? So
Yeah.
that's another thing that's
I think that'll be nice.
kind of far out of town,
Spend money
but.
that looks better.
Okay.
And actually, there could be some shading to that.
Right.
Yeah, the parking lot would be nice.
So you got enough to work with, Mick?
And you're fine with those lights that happen to be down there on the edge?
Yeah, as long as they're downcast.
Yeah.
All right.
So that'll be my proposal, to close the public hearing, for staff to draft this.
Okay, now I have enough information.
I second it. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good to see you, Rob.
You too.
Keisha,
How's Graham?
mention the cookie idea?
He's great. He's in Madrid.
Bacon cookie idea?
He's in Madrid every day during the week. He's in another country.
Have anything else to cover?
So if you're gonna take something up in the deliberative session, I gotta go. Other people
I don't think we need to take anything out.
Did we have anything else?
Take yours?
Yeah. I have one more thing. Close the public hearing. Take
Other business?
Do it up.
We'll talk about it next week.
No other business?
I'm in no rush, by the way. As long as I've been on my.
Friendship.
Are we adjourning unofficially,
No,
officially?
I thought we took our heads in the deliberative session.
I was gonna mention
Maybe
maybe
my
my
mistake.
next week, but I've done.
So all you guys get out of here, please.
So I don't have anything more.
We can do that.
So you
next-
wanna-
Next visit, right?
Thank you very much. It is late.
It is late. Yeah.
10:30.
So,
So 4 applications, 4 new applications for 1 meeting.
He should have been 10, not 10 minutes. They took a lot longer than they meant. And it's not full of any of us.
No, they seem.
so I'll make a motion to close the public hearing and take Ted.
Heads up in the deliberative session.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We'll verify that you're open and then you'll have the.
We're good?
Did we lose?
Everybody?
Are we out?
Yeah, and we appreciate that.
6 months later, you need.